everyone. Good evening and welcome to the March 8th public hearing of the Finance and Warrant Commission. This is night 2 of our hearing, which began last night. Welcome everyone. I'm going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. If everyone would please rise. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry, I didn't see you. Westcat is here, and we will grant permission to Westcat to for the meeting. Is there anyone else who would like to give? I see no affirmative responses. So with that, our continued agenda tonight is we will be hearing some the superintendent of schools, John Antonucci, and to be followed by the planning board. And without further ado, we welcome Mr. Antonucci.
Thank you, I'm right here, Mary. I've just moved back and forth here. Steve, can you just, for some reason this popped up that it's not showing up on the screen, sorry. I'm asking for reinforcements here.
No worries.
There you go. While Steve's getting me ready, and thank you. Number one, thank you for having me here tonight. I appreciate all of your time. I know it's a very busy time of year for FinCom. I think you're all kind of gluttonous for punishment myself, but thank you. I do want to introduce a few people. We do have some school committee members in attendance tonight. Chairman Brian Kelly could not make it. He sends his regrets. He's out of state, but we do have Jack O'Brien, Charlie Donahue. Oh, sorry. Joseph Jowdy and Carol Lewis are here. I also want to introduce my staff. A lot of you know them, but Emily Parks, the Assistant Superintendent, Keith Petraka, Director of Business and Finance, Steve Willett, Director of Technology, thank you, Steve, and Abby Hanscom, Director of Student Services. This presentation that I'm going to give tonight, a lot of you have seen, a lot of people in the audience have seen. It's a little bit of a mishmash for I've also added some slides and moved some slides around based on some Q&A from the school committee, so similar presentation, slightly different order. I'd also say the executive summary, which I hope you all have read, really gives the detail that I think you need. I hope you found it easy to understand and clear. So as a result, I'm going to kind of go through some of the slides much faster than normal because you have the detail, especially on all of the personnel requests, if that's okay. And naturally, once we finish, I'd like to answer any questions you might have. So let me just roll into it. This is our budget for fiscal year 2017. We're looking for a 5.97% increase. Let me just give you kind of a brief overview, give you some context to the budget. I want to say, and a lot of you know me, I've been here for 11 years now. I've sat through many meetings with a lot of you at this table. I think our school budget is as thorough, as comprehensive, and transparent, and clear as any school budget you'll find in the Commonwealth. I'd also want to say, and Barb, this is something you and I talked about at the subcommittee meeting, by the time it hits the public, this has gone through multiple iterations. We start as early as September in a larger institution. A lot of hands touch our budget. And I tell you that because by the time it hits the public, it's already been pared down significantly. And I just want to be clear about that. If I had given you the initial submissions from our cost center managers, we'd be talking about a double-digit increase in this budget. And honestly, I can justify every dollar of that double-digit increase. I'm also not unrealistic and trying to be responsible. But I just want you to know a lot of work has gone into that. I don't do it in any kind of cavalier fashion, okay? I do think, and I've said this now literally every year, multiple times a year for 11 years, I do think it's my responsibility to develop and present the needs-based budget to the community. I've done it every year. I don't want to apologize for that. In fact, I think it's the right thing to do. I think our community deserves to see what the needs of the school department and every department are in a very clear and transparent way. I'd also say, I don't think this increase should come as a surprise. It follows a lot of years of very lean growth in all the budgets in town. And Barb, I did this for you. I like to quote myself. It's something I do.
How are you,
I said all the time, just because a need goes unfunded in a given year, doesn't mean the need has gone away. Okay, and again, I think we do a good job every year of representing our needs. Some years we get it, some years we don't. That doesn't mean the need has gone away. And I've also said for years too that, a typical level services budget, meaning what do we require to provide the same level of service next year that we are today? At a minimum, it's going to be 3%. It's probably going to be mostly, on average, about 5%. Okay, and we can talk about that and why that is. We have many times over the years, but my point being, this number in that context is not that surprising. This is a slide that I threw in because the school committee had asked for it. It's a good reminder from where we came from. This is just our operating budget history for your information from fiscal year 2005 to the present, or at least projected. I think it's really unfortunate how we budget at the municipal level. We jump on this roller coaster. I know we'd love to talk about long-term and long-range planning. The way that the state and local budgets are funded really doesn't allow you to do that. If we were allowed to really forecast and budget for the long term, we wouldn't have this roller coaster. We'd have maybe a straight line or some other flatter plain line. So I just wanted to give you that history. Again, be glad to answer any questions about that. Some highlights of our request. Again, 5.97% increase.
Try it again.
I'll go through it.
Do you mind?
No. Can you shut the wireless off? maybe?
Yeah.
I'll shut the wireless off.
So I'll go through. You can't see it. The audience can't see it, but there it is. I think very importantly, I'm going to talk about this in more detail. That's okay. There's an increase of over $400,000 in our special ed department, our special ed program. And I'm going to come back to that, but I think that's very important to note. We are asking for one additional bus to transport the students who are now residing at university stations. So we're kind of transporting them in a patchwork fashion, kind of a Band-Aid. It's not sustainable, and it's time to just address the reality that we do have students residing there. That's $64,000. I want to be clear, because we've had a few questions about this. This is an annual cost. We do not own our buses. This is not the cost to purchase a bus. This is the cost of our contract for one additional bus per year, okay? Somewhat related, we're in the middle of a 5-year contract for our school bus transportation. That's a publicly bidded contract. We do have a relatively small contractual increase next year, built in almost $30,000. That is essentially a fixed cost. We are asking for a fairly modest increase in our FF&E, our fixtures, furniture, and equipment account. That includes technology as well. That's about a $130,000 increase. And we are requesting a total of 9.65 FTE and new personnel. Included in that number is over 2 positions in the special ed department. So again, this is a sort of for your information slide. This is our $42 million budget carved up into 5 large categories. The reason I use this on an annual basis is just to show you that, not surprisingly, salaries are by far our largest budget driver. You can see here 83% of our total operating budget is personnel. And again, it's not surprising, right? We're a people business. We put teachers in front of kids and support them accordingly. The FY17 projected budget does include cost of living increases for employees. Several of our collective bargaining agreements, including the teacher's contract, is up at the end of this year. So a lot of that increase is estimated based on, as I described here, kind of market-driven estimates. So I think the increase might be. So I want to talk a little bit about this. You can call it whatever you want. In this iteration of the budget, I call this unavoidable cost. I make the argument, or more than an argument, so to state factually, that at least 1.3%, 1.29 of our increase is due to what I would classify as this unavoidable cost, i.e., we have really no choice but to fund them. Here's a special education total I referred to earlier. this is a conversation that could take 10 hours, and a lot of you sat at the table during subcommittee meetings and over the years talking about special ed. So much of what we do in the area of special education, it's super important, and it's incredible services that we provide to our students who have special needs. But most of those services, a lot of those services are mandated by federal and state law and regulation. So we do have a lot of control over the budget, and we manage it very impressively, and I think we manage it well, but some things are simply beyond our control. University Station Transportation, again, I don't need to repeat what I said about that. Our numbers at the elementary level, enrollment numbers, have been declining fairly precipitously. We collect fees for kindergarten. Because we have less kindergartens, we have less revenue in the kindergarten. So it's only $20,000, but it's $20,000 that I have no choice but to cut next year, or add, I should say. And again, the school bus transportation contract. Now, why this is important, I do think they're fixed costs, essentially fixed costs, and the accountant might argue with me on the definition, but I think you understand my point. I would put them in the same category as health insurance. Right? That's not contained in the school department budget, it's contained in the municipal budget. And, very wisely, we take costs like this, and I don't know how many costs like this there are in the municipal budget, I'm not really privy to that information. But we sort of take those costs off the top, I think, and then determine how much money is left to allocate to the departments. And I could make the argument that these types of costs that I just showed on the last screen, those should all be taken off the top. My point is, I don't think those should cannibalize the rest of our budget. I believe strongly that it should. I have no control, the town has no control, it's part of our basic services. And I think if we did that, or if we just considered that even, that it would allow for much fairer comparison, much more equitable comparison of our department budget requests. And if you did factor that in, my increase wouldn't be near what it is. We'd be in the neighborhood of 4.5%. So it's just, again, food for thought, something for you to consider. I also want to just add too, we've talked a lot, I haven't really heard anything formal about this, but I sort of heard it through the grapevine, that they would like me to come in at a 4% budget increase. I'm not sure where that came from. But I also pushed the committee to look at the kind of an apples to apples comparison. I don't know what's contained in the municipal department budgets. I'm not privy to that. I've never seen a line item, say, budget for any other town department. So in school, we're a large entity. I understand that. We have utility costs that we carry. We have insurance costs. We have legal costs. We have a whole host of things that really aren't education per se, but that they're priorities that we have to put on the table as a department and wrestle with those priorities. And I just don't know if that's really the business that we should be in. Do we really want to trade teachers for legal costs, or do we want to trade teachers for transportation, right? I don't know if other departments do that, so I would just ask you, or ask you to weigh in at some point, is putting an across-the-board guideline out there the right thing to do? I don't think it is. I think I'm in a position clear to many people who asked about that. I don't think that's a strategic or smart way to budget, but I thought it was important to talk about that. I'm going to segue into some new positions that I'm going to hustle through these, and then get more to some bigger picture contextual things I want to talk about. We do have some positions at the high school. They are 100% related to class size at the high school. And if you see here, I'll just give you one chart. We have, in the social studies department, we have a quarter of all of our classes that are exceeding 25 students. And I would just tell you, for a high-performing school district, a district like Westwood, a district that we want to be, that's kind of a high number. And it's something that I just can't believe the community is tolerating. And so, again, the deferred needs, we pushed it off, kicked the can down the road, so far. I think it's time to address those problems. So there are some positions at Westwood High School to address that. One in social studies, one in English, and excuse me, another. Actually, what was it? I'm sorry. Oh, it was SIP. So these three. SIP is our Senior Independent Project Program. the executive summary has some detail about why that asbestos caused fires. Something that actually received a lot of attention at a couple of our meetings is that we are asking for a 1.0 FTE social worker at Westwood High School. If you have further questions on this, Abby Hanscom does a really nice job of articulating the need here. But suffice it to say that student mental health and our need to support all of our students at the high school is paramount. And it is addressing student mental health needs is a pervasive issue and topic, need in public education, not just in Westwood, but in the state and throughout the country. And we really need some help. And it's as simple as that. I don't know if it's really a school cost. It's really a societal and community need to support these students. We have, by the end of the year, we will literally have dozens of hospitalizations for the students at Westwood High School. Those kids need support before they go out. They certainly need support when they return. And there's just a lot of work around student mental health and those hospitalizations that we're just getting by. We're just getting by today. So that's why the position is in there. We also are asking for an expansion of our music program. Believe it or not, for anybody who goes to the musical over the next couple of days or seen a Westwood High School concert, our music program is first class. Amazingly, it's only staffed by 1.4, less than 1.5 teachers. The program has grown, proportionally, as they say here, proportionally outpaced our normal increase in student body, and we're having a hard time keeping up. We can't offer the courses we want to offer, and we have really high class sizes. So there's an ask for a music teacher. Moving on quickly to the middle school, I will say too, ironically, the class size at the middle school is probably, the issue of class size is probably the worst, or however you want to say that, at the middle school. That being said, the middle school is a little trickier. We have a team-based schedule that makes it a little harder to add teachers. We also know that we're just about peaking with enrollment at the middle school, and we're really reluctant to request new staff, and we know that in a matter of maybe even 2 years, we would need, or 3 years, we would need to cut them. So we have decided to prioritize program development over class size reduction for those reasons. We are looking to expand a wonderful program that got added in fiscal year 2016, and this is an expansion of our computer science and engineering program. Right now, it's sort of a small program. Students need about 30 days a year in grades 6, 7, and 8. By adding another teacher, we'll be able to double the size of that program and focus a little more on the computer science aspect of it, coding and whatnot, than the engineering, which is where our focus is today. I think this is an interesting one, and it's a small ask, but it's an important thing, I think, for people to understand. We currently have, due to enrollment, class size needs, due to just our ability or our need to manage the building in the best way possible, our principal, Allison Borges, took on a class this year. And I will tell you, being a principal of the middle school is not an easy job, and taking the principal out of her role teach a class every day is a huge ask. Now, it's wonderful in many ways, right? She gets to kind of dip back into the classroom, make some connections with kids, but it is really hard. It is certainly not sustainable. And again, I'm not sure it's something as a first-class elite school district that we want to be doing. It'd be like me taking a shift in payroll once a week. And you don't want me doing that, all right? Taking me out of my role, large role, important role, critical role, and taking it offline. So again, we're doing to get by. It's not sustainable. So again, it's an ask. To me, it's a no-brainer. But again, it has a budget impact, which I'm sensitive about. Another class size issue, actually, in grades 3 and 4 at the Deerfield School, we have very high class size. I think it's actually up to 25 and 25 students per class in grades 3 and 4. Again, not reflective of a high quality school district. It's simply too high. Early in the, actually post-budget cycle last year, we did add an instructional assistant just to help mitigate that issue. That's currently being funded in FY16. So it's in the FY17 budget, but it's an existing position if if that makes sense. No matter what happens with the budget, this position basically has to stay. Another kind of new, I'd say the newest, or maybe the most innovative and exciting, is a total of 1.5 FTE for elementary science coordinator and elementary science content specialist. And I'm not going to read this slide or go into great detail unless you have questions about it after. Just have Johnny here. I know she's smiling behind me. I can tell you this has been on our list of priorities and our list of desires and wants for at least my 11 years. And Josepha tells me this need predates us. It's a huge need. It's an important need. We're trying to prepare kids for the 21st century. By the way, we're 16 years into the 21st century, and the need to address elementary science is critical. We do a great job, and we've built it over the years, with elementary literacy specialists, with elementary math specialists. We know we have tangible results. From adding that support at the elementary level, we can see the results of that work. We don't have it in science, and we simply need it. And so this is one that we're actually very excited about. And then this last slide is about special education. Just a little more detail about the increase. Over 2.0 FTE in personnel. That is personnel that we need to directly service students on individual education plans. I would call them IEPs. Again, not pretty much, no matter what happens with the budget, these are positions that will be in our program next year. I have no choice. They're based on needs that we know today, and we have no choice but to find out. Similarly, our out-of-district tuition and transportation account, it's an over $200,000 increase. It's a range here, because this is partly a projection. We're going to have between 22 and 24 students in out-of-district placements. That's tuition, and then the cost of transporting them there. We'll come back to that at the end. But that's a significant cost. We also have something called the Leslie Intern Program. We've been for 5 years having this thing called the Leslie Intern Program. We're the first in Massachusetts, I believe. Am I exaggerating? I do this. It's a phenomenal program where Abby actually, under his leadership, we train future special educators in the district. They get a master's degree, they get licensed to be.
You're the only one person here.
Thank you. Okay, we were the only one something. It's really short money. We hire these interns for $10,000. They provide unbelievably high level of service to our students every single day. We're also able to develop sorely needed future special educators. We're funding that out of existing Medicaid balances. Again, it's been great that we're able to do it. It's not really a sustainable thing long term. And this is absolutely 100% saving the district money. Can't say it any more directly than that. This is just a chart for information. People ask all the time, how much does special ed cost? So we call it student services. That number this number here, this chart excludes things that do fall under the student services umbrella. There's preschool, our guidance department, as well as school health, which is school nurses. For over $9 million of our operating budget, that's almost 22% is for special ed related services. It's a large cost, it's an important cost, but it's just a reality of dealing with public schools. Non-salary increases is just a kind of short list for your review. Talked about some of them. The one I do want to point out is technology. I think as you all know, we have a one-to-one computer program at Western High School. We use something called Google Chromebooks. It has been a home run since the day we launched it. This year, we're able to bring that one-to-one program down to 8th grade. And this budget request allows us to bring it down to 7th grade. Long term, I'm just telling you, long term, we'd like to bring it down all the way to 3rd grade. We think it is revolutionized teaching and learning, and what we're doing in the classroom today is just simply better. Our ability to have this ubiquitous access to computers. So this is just an expansion. So I want to pull that out because I think that's an important thing. So, gonna just kind of roll into some concluding statements. Certainly, this increase is larger than some prefer. I don't think it's that high myself, but it addresses critical needs that we've been deferring. We've either ignored them or simply deferred them while we all waited for the economy to recover. And that's it. I mean, the money wasn't there, the money wasn't there, but it doesn't mean the needs have gone away. I also give the school committee a lot of credit. This issue of class size, enrollment increases, is a pervasive issue for us. It's probably the #1 topic that especially elementary parents like to discuss with our school committee and myself. And the school committee had to hold the line for several years. And I'll say, I'm actually kind of mad at myself now for doing this. You know, but last year, we essentially fought with a group of parents. I think it was civil, but you understand my point. For 10 months, over adding a teacher in first grade for classes that were 24 and 25 students in first grade. We fought them for 10 months over $60,000. All right? And again, I sit back, I actually regret that. I really do. But we're trying to hold the line. We're trying to be conservative, trying to do the right thing, but what are we doing? And it just doesn't make any sense, I don't think, anymore. And I just think it's time to address the problems. Especially when there's clear signs to me that we've had an economic recovery. Right? Not maybe as much statewide or nationally, but certainly locally. And this is not a new slide, but I think there was clear evidence of that at the November town meeting. Residents, including myself, were asked to consider a lot of new spending. We were looking for design costs in buildings. We were looking to purchase a piece of land. That was the subject of a lot of discussion between the school committee and the selectmen. We created stabilization funds, all kinds of stuff. And I just fought a group of parents for 10 months over $60,000. You know? And I guess I didn't get the memo that the economy had recovered locally, because I wouldn't have done that. Yet here we are, 4 months after the school year ended, being asked to consider all this. And I don't get it. It's that's some of the shed the light for me. And all these things, by the way, I support all of them. Okay, I mean, I benefit from all these incredible things that are happening in town, including this beautiful building that we're in. And I think future-oriented thinking, right? It's a sign of a one-man town. There's no dispute. Westwood is an unbelievable one-man town. I brag about it all the time to my colleagues. And normally I applaud that, but I say here, I caution that we shouldn't plan for the future if we're going to sacrifice the present. We're talking about funding basic services here. Special education, transportation, right? Teachers. And I just think that if we have resources, that we need to pay for basic services first. And I use the term all the time. Our residents expect it, and our residents demand it. All right? We're really proud of the fact that we don't have any potholes on the road, yet I'm fighting a group of parents, and it's 25 kids this tall sitting in a class. Right? So there's a disconnect for me. This is just one man talking here, okay? But there's a major disconnect for me. It stands for itself. I don't think there's a better investment in the future than educating our kids. So for future-oriented, I think we need to stay future-oriented as it relates to education as well. I'm sure I get criticized for being overly aggressive with my advocacy for the public schools. Right? I certainly want to apologize for advocating for the Western public schools. I would never apologize for that. But my opinion happens to be an opinion that's shared by a vast majority of Westwood residents. Most of whom, including many of you at this table, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, they moved to the towns for the schools. And I don't think that's subject to debate. I really don't, not in a town like this. So I want to add too, I've had a lot of discussions, had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people over the fall and the winter. And this is just my opinion, but two themes really seem to emerge. They seem to percolate over and over again. I really don't believe residents have any idea what we're doing here. They do not feel informed about the workings of the local government. And by the way, I put myself in that category, including the schools. Right? They don't really fully understand what's happening. They don't understand how decisions are made, how we're establishing priorities. I heard that over and over again. I also, and this is somewhat redundant, they do view Westwood as an elite community, but they expect services that are commensurate with that elite status. So I built this budget with these two themes in mind. You know, and I say here, yeah, I get it. I mean, I'm aware that my proposal is a little more ambitious than at least the selectmen I think would prefer, and that's fine. But I think it's really important to have public dialogue about our needs every year. Now, I say school department needs, I'd extend that. I think the community really needs to weigh in on all the needs in town. Again, quoting myself, because it's excellent. The only way to have a thought, I'm going to read this, because I read it at school committee. The only way to have a thoughtful, well-informed conversation as a community about our needs and priorities is for the school department to fully articulate what those needs and priorities are and to provide ample information to understand the costs associated with the program. Okay? It would be lazy for me to throw out a number like 4% just because. I'm not going to do it. I have never done it, and I'm not going to do it next year. I'm not going to do it the year after. We can debate our needs. We can have a conversation about it. I think it has to happen in public. I really do think it has to happen in public. But we're going to talk about our needs. And we're going to invite residents to do the same, and we're going to continue to beat that drum. I also say quality comes with a price. It just does. So we can either fund an elite school system or decide that we want to be something else. And I'm quite certain that's not what people want. Now, here's the thing. That's my soapbox, okay? And I'm sure a lot of you are shaking your head yes, right? But I will say, I want to end on a very positive note. It's super exciting time right now in the Western Public Schools. I think in town, right? There's a lot of cool stuff happening. Our students are killing it academically. Every single student just about reports that they are well prepared for their college experiences. Our arts program is thriving. Again, come to the musical this week. It's going to be phenomenal. Our athletics program, by the way, our girls basketball team is playing this week. They're thriving. Our faculty is recognized. We happen to have, by the way, the National Foreign Language Teacher of the Year. National Foreign Language Teacher, right? Things are going well. They really are. And because of that, we're finally at the point where we can actually consider what's next, right? What's exciting? How can we enhance our students' experiences? And this budget kind of starts that exercise. We're looking to expand our students' exposure to engineering and computer science, looking to expand our elective offerings, do stuff in music. We've implemented the SIP program, the Senior Independent Project Program. It's phenomenal. It's a capstone experience for our kids. They're doing amazing things. I can't wait for my own child to participate. And this budget does begin that work and includes what I think are very modest increases. If you strip away the mandated, uncontrollable fixed costs, and strip away things that we just have to fund next year, it's a very modest increase. And again, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't advocate for this type of investment. I really would. I mean, I tell the school committee all the time, the day I stop advocating is the day they need to ask me to leave the job. That's my job, and I'm going to continue to do it. I have a couple slides on per pupil expenditures, if anybody wants to talk about something riveting. Anybody? Want me to wrap it up? Because the school committee asked about it, I think it's important, and then I'll sit down and let you answer questions. So, the very natural question, the very important question over here is, are we spending too much? Are we spending too little? Are we spending more than other communities? So this is tough to read, I apologize, but I think there are 35 communities on this list. I can give you the backup at any point if you want. And the way I selected the communities, I did this a couple of years ago actually, they were either neighbors, they were either members of our collaborative. We belong to something called the Education Cooperative. It's a collaborative of towns like ours. Or they appeared on, I think it was the Boston Magazine list of top 25 schools in the state. And so I kind of compiled all this data about per pupil expenditures to see where we fell. Now we're in the red here, okay? So we're kind of comfortably in the middle of all these towns. Here's the state average here in orange. So I like to be in the middle, right? This is Weston, Concord, Carlisle. I kind of like where we are. But here's the interesting thing. So this is the most current data that's available. This is actually 2 fiscal years ago, but that's our state Department of Education. They'll get to it. So I went back and looked. I wanted to see kind of how we've done, many years ago. I'm going to do a quick flip. What I'm going to show you is the same group of towns for fiscal year 2005. So it's at 9 years. And we're kind of in the same spot. Right? We're right in the middle. We haven't really jumped one way or another. The state average really at least relatively speaking, hasn't jumped one way or another. And so things haven't really changed. So for those who would argue that we're spending at some huge rates, it's not happening. For those who suggest we're spending more than other comparable towns, that's not happening. And I think very importantly, when I dug one layer deeper, just about the 9-year rate of growth. Actually, that's more than 9 years. My math is not great. No, so that should say 14. That's actually a typo. Here's the interesting thing. So we've grown over that time period by over 32%. I don't want to minimize that, by the way. I mean, it's 32%. Okay. I mean, the state average at the same time period grew more than us. So on average, our state grew at a higher rate. So I think we're in good company. I think we're spending very responsibly. I think we're spending where we should be spending. You can certainly argue for more. Probably make the argument, I could make the argument that we should be spending significantly. I won't, because it's not, I don't think that's a popular theme, kind of finance committee. But my point is, we've done a pretty good job. We really have. And this is, I would say, this is basically on my watch. So I take responsibility for the good and the bad and the ugly, but we've been doing a pretty good job. And so I just wanted to share that with you. And if you don't mind, I'll sit down or stand and be glad to entertain any questions you have.
Thank you, whatever is most comfortable for you. I think I'd like to turn it over to Barb DeLisle, who is our education subcommittee chair, to start up our discussion. Thanks, Barb.
I moved over to the dark side. I'm sorry. I just wanted to thank you, John. I've heard this a couple of times now. I know I've gotten a lot of questions from members on the FinCom, especially on some of the information that's gone out from the school department. And I kind of wanted to reframe what you've just been talking about, kind of in the context of what we've been talking about in our multiple meetings, and people are certainly welcome to come to our meetings where we hear from the municipal side on the costs and the revenues all the time. So, and it's also on WestCat, so it's available for everybody to look at. There's information online available. So I just want to kind of reframe it, because I think I heard the comment from somebody that, oh, there's going to be class size reduction, they're cutting the budget by $700,000. Just to reframe it, the budget last year, and I'll just give broad numbers instead of down to it, was last year was $39,891,000. So if you add the things that John's looked at, contractual steps, there's two components to the salary increase. Well, actually kind of three. One is additional staff. One are steps that are contractual, whether or not they have a contract, a COLA contract for this coming year or not, they're obligated to do this. That's $400,000 about. The other things he talked about for kindergarten offset, that's kind of just a function of the way the money operates, as $20,000. He didn't mention, but MIS shared expenses, it's not really a choice. And then you look at SPED, the out-of-district tuition, the transportation, and then the personnel for the internal program that's going in the high school. That represents about a 2% increase. Those are the elements that are no choice. If you didn't do another thing, for the budget for next year, it's that. The University Station bus of $64,000, the town has talked about that number because it's direct University Station costs of the town covering that from mitigation money from university, or money set aside for University Station. So that's kind of a wash. So the number that we have been talking about, that we've heard about, is a 4% increase. That would be $1.59 million. If you take out those mandated uses that we just talked about up above, of about $790,000, that means that to be within the 4%, we're talking about 800,000 available. Now, within that is his collective bargaining. The number that he's using for collective bargaining for giving cost of living increases to the staff right now is 848,000. Obviously, that's subject to negotiation. And the number that we're off by, the number that between the 4% and the 5.97 is 785,000. So just does that help at all in the guidance of what we're talking about? So we're really, 2% is gone. I mean, John, I know, is kind of like looking at it from 5.9 and going down, so we're more building it up.
Okay, can I ask you a question on that? So you're suggesting that, you seem to put the teacher's raise and the difference in the same sentence, so I just want to clarify. So you're suggesting that we should be giving a 0 to our teachers?
No, I'm just
Okay,
saying I'm just saying that
yeah.
that's not obligated. You've had it in your fixed costs, and it's not. It's subject to negotiation.
Oh, I would say,
I mean,
a 0 would be an
Well,
affront,
yeah, no, I know that.
to our municipal and school employees.
I know
Certain
that, but
economic-
I'm just saying, that is still, that's the collective bargaining, is we have been talking about what the impact of raises are, because the other issue is that your contract is will probably be a 3-year contract. I know that would probably be your goal, be the 3-year contract. So we're looking at some sustainability as well, and what the impact on the budget going forward is going to be. So just to let you know, so we're really talking about, if we were to stick to the 4%, he's talking about, that's pretty much eaten up by the collective bargaining number that he's working with, so that anything else, but we're talking about additions, we're not talking about things being taken away. If there are things that he would like to add to the budget. So just to be clear, that 785,000 that we're bringing up in his number is still additions, and so we're not talking about, unless there's a choice by the school committee that they prefer some of the additions and then they want to take away something else. But there are no proposed cuts to the actual budget, to what he already has in place. There's a cut to what his proposed budget is, but we're not talking about a cut to any existing programs unless the school committee chooses to do that route. So anyway, that just frames it a little bit for everybody.
So just to clarify, I don't know, I think you referred to your email I sent to the community, but it specifically said proposed, my proposed.
But there was
No, I understand.
misinterpretation.
I understand.
You know, it's just, I just want to clarify that.
I was very careful about that.
You can't control how people read it.
Questions from FinCom?
I'm somewhat confused, just to clarify this. You know, just short of 80% of the proposed increase is tied into teacher salaries. What amount of that is, still vague with the way you described, contractual requirement, COLA?
Well, so steps are about 500,000, so just steps, I could rip people on
Yeah.
scale, $1 million, right, obviously. That's about $500,000.
Okay.
And then our estimate for sort of cost of living increases, for the contracts that are expiring, is, I don't have the right in front of me, over a little.
848,000.
So that represents 1.2 million of the 1.8 proposed,
And the rest is what, additional?
And then there's additional staff, it's additional staff.
which is a remainder. Okay.
And also there are some contracts that aren't subject to collective bargaining. They're negotiated, I guess.
George?
Yeah, I'd just like to maybe add to some of the context that maybe that Barbara added. First of all, I think it's fabulous that we've got this type of turnout tonight. It's something we've always liked to see at FinCom meetings, and we aren't always successful. I've been on the FinCom for 12 years, so let me share with you some observations. I think all of us should be extremely proud of the support Westwood has provided to its schools, but I think that's also reflected by the fact that 2/3 of our operating budgets in this town go to our schools. So when we're talking about looking at municipal needs or school needs, historically, I think you can define this town as extremely supportive of its schools. For those of us involved in University Station, I think we can also be very pleased with its economic success. Those of us who are involved in estimating the revenue and expenses, it is really turning out to be a tremendous success and an opportunity for this town. But along with the success are really coming some very, very important needs, especially on the municipal side. I think you've seen us address the renovation or rebuilding of Fire Station number 2, which allows us to get critical health and safety needs wherever they're needed in town. But we also have other critical capital needs that have to be addressed because of the growth we are experiencing. It's part of our success, and it's primarily very heavily going to be in the public safety side. We are a financially very successful town. We are AAA bond rated. I think there are only 5 towns of our size in the Commonwealth who have that. But as part of that rating, I think the outside world really wants to make sure we have very, very sound financial plans and policies in place. And I think as sometimes as difficult as it may be, as we analyze the municipal needs of our town, we have to make sure that any increases, especially those above Proposition 2.5, are sustainable. One of the riskiest things we can do as a community is put things into an operating budget that may satisfy things we would like to do, but financially are not sound and they're not sustainable as we go forward. And probably the last thing I want to say here is I probably have both the pleasure and the pain. I was budget director for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in 1979 to 1981 before I went off to Fidelity Investments. And that was the year that Proposition 2.5 was enacted. It was very painful on the state side. It was very painful in towns and communities. On the state side, we had to dramatically cut programs to try and increase local aid. But one of the motivations, whether we like it or not, for Proposition 2.5 was the fact there was a complete disconnect between town administrators and their schools. Towns and cities were actually suing schools in court because they could not sustain the rate of growth. So I want us, as we look at the different options and the needs of town, to recognize there's a balance, and we need to work together at the end of the day. So I just wanted to share with you some of those observations, but probably most important to understand is 2/3 of every dollar we spend in this community goes to our schools, and 1/3 has to support everything else in the town. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from FinCom?
And if you don't have the numbers here, I completely understand, and I didn't do my homework. But of the unavoidable costs, on an annual basis, what is that percentage of unavoidable costs? I know it's going to be fluctuating, but kind of on average, what means, so it's a good chunk now.
It's an impossible question to answer. I mean, the last 2 years, we've had significant costs. So last year we had over $600,000 in special ed costs. That, again, I would classify as unavoidable this year. I mean, in past years it hasn't been, but you just don't know, because you don't know what the needs of the kids are going to be. And I don't mean to give you a wishy-washy answer. They're so kid-specific and so need-specific that it's just impossible to predict. And I said for years, I mean, special ed, it's by far the most volatile of all budgets. We're not alone, by the way. This is something that every single town in the Commonwealth, the rest of nationwide, I just don't have an answer for you. Next year could be zero.
I'm actually more thinking of historically. I know you.
Yeah.
Move out.
Well, again, so actually, one of the things that has allowed us to survive really over the last few years without making kind of corny stuff, has been that we've actually been able to take reductions in areas of special ed. We had kids that reached age 22 and they essentially fall off the books at age 22, so we're able to take tuition savings there. When I got here 10 years ago, 11 years ago, we had over 40 kids in out-of-district placements. We have between 22 and 24 today. So taking those kids out of very costly out-of-district placements and bringing them home to more affordable, homegrown, internal programs has allowed us to save money. But we have captured all the savings we could on an annual basis. Again, if you picture that roller coaster, every year we take what savings we're able to take, and on the years where we have a need, we don't have a contingency. It doesn't exist. It's a terrible way to budget. I'm not suggesting it's a great way, but it's the reality of municipal budget. Yeah. He's saying one student could be $150 million. A student could move in tomorrow. They could be on a $300,000 tuition school next year.
You do get some through the circuit breaker, but not immediate. It's a
Yeah, so you do get, what we call circuit breaker reimbursements, but, it's the state reimbursement program. We're kind of high-cost special need. And all the money we get from the circuit breaker goes directly into the budget as an offset, so that's look at our budget, that's going down.
Which is also a roller coaster,
Yeah,
because they don't fund that every year.
John, you mentioned that things like special ed and transportation should come off the top. Can you tell us exactly what it is that you're suggesting, and is it something being done in other municipalities that?
Yeah, I guess what I'm suggesting is, you know, I get very, I don't know the answer to the question, right? I mean, and so I put it out there really as food for thought, maybe an area, you know, to research is, you know, our school department budget as a departmental budget is really unique. I mean, we have to cover everything. So our boiler breaks, we have to cover them boiler. If we have legal costs, we have to cover them legal costs. You know, we have all these things with that. I don't know how the other department budgets work. You know, I'm making it up. I mean, I don't know if the DPW carries a legal expense. And what I'm saying is we are forced to have those types of expenses compete with teachers, and direct services to kids. And I'd say, so throwing out an arbitrary target for everybody to meet, it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, I think we should all put up these base budgets. You know, and that's all I'm saying is that there are costs that I don't, when you really do an apples to apples comparison, I'm not sure, I've never seen it. I've never seen a line item budget, the level of detail that we present ours in. I'm sure maybe you have, so.
Do other districts do it differently?
No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
The counter to that, of course, is that the town covers health insurance for all of the
Yeah.
school employees. And, you know, when there's a budget, when we have line items coming in with numbers associated with teachers, that doesn't include the extra cost to the health insurance, which is going on the municipal side.
No, I fully agree. That's not even a debate. I'd say it's a unique animal, right? School department budget, they're big and they contain everything. You know, I use an example of the snowplow budget. We've been really lucky this year, right? We haven't, but you know, I would have to carry an unforeseen expense in my budget, right? So if you really want to do an apples to apples comparison, you have the DPW add $1 million to the budget next year in anticipation of needing to plow snow. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm just trying to make a point. It's somewhat philosophical, but somewhat practical to say, why are we trying to have everybody be the same? And by the way, the 5% that we got last year, the municipal took 5% too. I mean, it wasn't like, and again, I don't understand why, because I don't know if that was a need or not, but I don't, we had presented a significant needs-based budget. Everybody ends up with the same. I don't know why everybody ends up with the same, but that's kind of the system. I don't get it. So put it out for food for thought.
Same percentage, not same amount.
The $800,000 question, where do we go from there?
Well, so, I mean, it's a great question. Craig, I'm not the really person to answer, I don't think. But to kind of dovetail and answer yours and maybe say something about George's. I just think, and I've been beating this drum, that the one thing we don't do as a community is put all the priorities on the table at the same time and ask the residents how they want to spend their money. Okay? We don't do it. We work in very closed circles, and I do too. I understand that. So I think at some point, we put all these very important initiatives on the table and actually ask the community how they want to spend their money. Right now, there's no dialogue and there's no form, there's no mechanism to do that. And I think
I will disagree strongly with that. There is a forum, it's FinCom, and we meet every month, all year long, and discuss all of these items. And the budget comes up every single month. I think all of us on this committee have heard multiple times.
So I think tonight's crowd is evidence that we need to go get the people. And so I would say that. And I just want to say one thing too about 2.5. I'm very sensitive to Prop 2.5, right? By the way, Prop 2.5 doesn't mean that your budget should go up 2.5. That's a bit of a myth. And I would say it's really disingenuous for us to even put the word override in the same sentence as the FY17 budget. We have $5 million in free cash the last time I looked. To suggest to the residents that we need to do an override if we're anything more than 4% is disingenuous and misleading. Again, it's about prioritization. We want to have a dialogue about priorities. The school committee absolutely is willing to go back to the drawing board. I have some ideas. I'll share them with you tonight if you want. We want to go back to the table. We want to, we try to bring this budget down to a reasonable level. But I have to tell you, we are not paring it down where we're gonna impact basic services while we're putting money in stabilization, while we're building buildings, while we're buying land. I don't think there's gonna be an appetite from our community to do that. So let's have the dialogue. You know.
You know, John, I find your statement somewhat disconcerting, having served on multiple task forces within this community, and a lot of this stuff is televised. And when you say, for example, you haven't seen the municipal budget, the municipal budget is available by line item, it's online, it's discussed openly. Okay, so I think I'm very uncomfortable saying that.
No, you're not seeing the municipal budget, but
John,
the line items are just salaries and expenses, that's all.
Well, John, you get one item, you have $40 million budget, which you have total flexibility to decide how you spend, correct? Right, and nobody else in this town has that. Once you get your budget allocation, you and the school committee decide how you spend that.
Right.
But let me raise another issue here, John. There are 15 members who sit on this finance committee, and I think they are probably somewhat reflective. A lot of these folks have younger kids in school systems. Some of us have already had kids who've gone through the school system. It's a very, very hard-working committee, and I would say 99 out of 100%, the town meeting looks at this group with the number of hundreds of hours that are put in, and goes with their recommendations. So when we hear all the, by the way, the other thing I want to make, I've had several neighbors come up to me, they've shared with me the communications that have gone out, and to say that they're confusing would be an understatement. And to say that they're misrepresentation, and I think are frankly not talking about the process we go through. But let me ask you a question. If this committee, after they hear all of the input, makes a recommendation in terms of the write-up we do at town meeting, are you prepared to support it? And I don't know what the recommendation is going to be, but I want to ask you a very direct question. Are you prepared to support the recommendation the Finance and Warrant Commission makes on the articles the selectmen have put forward?
I couldn't even answer that question. I'm the superintendent. I work for an elected board.
Let me ask the school committee members, are you prepared to support, in other words, this commission will hear all of the arguments, all of the issues, all the concerns. We have to take a vote on every one of the warrant articles.
Depends, I mean, that's.
We have to deliberate as a board.
We can't
Well,
tell you right now that.
John, how about you?
I wouldn't answer that. I wouldn't be responsible.
Are you going to advocate against what the Finance and Warrant Commission, I mean, you've sort of opened the door here by, what you're doing, John, is putting other needs that the town has, and you're basically setting up a very, very potential conflicting situation. Because you're saying that you want to measure the needs of the school, whether it's a stabilization fund, whether it's tax relief for the elderly, which we're trying to do, whether it's general tax relief across the table. You're basically setting up a highly competitive,
It's his job
conflicting
to
process.
advocate for the schools.
That's right.
That's his job to advocate for the schools. That's his job.
Excuse me, folks, we have rules where we need folks to be identified on the record. So at this point, we are engaging Finance Commission members in their questions, and then we will open it up to the public. So please leave your comments and your questions until we open it up.
I guess, Mary Ann, the way I'll finish is the following, John. What's been brought to my attention is a lack of cooperation, a lack of meeting, which I have never seen over the last 12 years between the municipal side, let me finish, Josepha, the municipal side and the town government side to resolve this issue. So it comes now in front of the Finance and Warrant Commission because we were extremely concerned about what is going on. But if you're heading towards, which I think you are, an open conflict situation on town floor, I think that will divide this town like it's never been divided before. And I think you, as a senior administrator in this town, have as much as responsibilities as municipal folks to work together to resolve it. But I'm just very, very, very concerned. My neighbors are coming up to me. The bottom line, they're telling me, is it the police station or is it the schools? And I said, how the heck did we get there?
I would just ask you,
Mary Ann.
Jeff's going to answer, I just have to not to speculate about anything I'm going to do or not do. It doesn't, it's just not, it's not fair.
John, you said what you are going to do.
That's how I'm going to advocate for what's in public
No,
schools.
no, I heard.
Unapologetic.
Fine. Then we'll
I just
also
wanna say
advocate
that-
against it.
Josepha.
The school committee has asked for a meeting with the Board of Selectmen on numerous occasions. We've put forth a proposal, I think, just yesterday, asking formally for a meeting with the selectmen, board to board, and we're hoping to have that to resolve some of these issues.
Thank you. Other questions from FinCom? Yeah, Peter?
John, help me understand. I'm worried, and I think it sort of came up before, in the future. So you know, I think everybody knows, and if they don't, they should know, that we had very tight budgets, 2010, 2011, virtually no increase or under 2%. Last year, we were a little over 5%, the year before that, school budget went up about 4%, now we're looking at 6%. My concern is, it's not sustainable. When do we get to a point where we're not eating into excess money, or money that's maybe needed somewhere else? So I've been on FinCom, I'm on my 6th year, and all I heard was we're underfunded capital. We predicted we'd get $5 million from university ad development. We have a net of about 3. Last year we took $1.5 million out of that 3 to spend on operating. We're now talking about $800,000 in the budget that we proposed to us that we saw. I think about 4% for school, not 6. So essentially, we've eaten up all that University Avenue money to put it to operating, and not a lot of it's going to go to capital. 2 or 3 years down the road, we're going to be back where we are, where we have an operating budget that's been sustained, but we're cutting our capital to the point of we just can't fund it, and we're going to underfund our capital. That's my concern, is when does it stop? When do we get, the average person's getting 3% pay raises, they're getting inflation to 2%, and the school budget's going up 6%. Do you have any idea? Is it how do we sustain it?
Yeah, I mean, until we stop serving kids, I can't promise that there's not going to be volatility in the school department budget. The reality is, we did underfund it for several years. We're playing catch up. I mean, if anybody wants to send me a list of what you think should be cut from what most of it is direct services to kids, let me know. I mean, no one, you know, that's the dialogue Peter, that I want to have in town. I mean, I just do. I can't promise that. Is it going to be 6% next year? No, it's not going to be. It's not. I can promise you that today. Not going to be 5%. I mean, but I don't know what to tell you. I mean, we have these needs that, you know, we've kicked the can down the road so far. I don't know what to do. You know, we have 25 kids right now in grade 3 at the Deerfield School. We're only in grade 3 once. Okay? So who's to say that that kid shouldn't have a teacher reduce class size? To me, when I talk about lining up priorities, we just need to have it done. You know, and about the capital, I hear you. I was the recipient of $406,000 a year for 2 years, right? Happy to have it. Now it's wonderful that we can do more. I'd also say, though, some of the discussions that have been happening is we're also building, we also built the fire station, the police station, theoretically within 2.5. You know, there's been debate that's cannibalizing our ability to do operating. So again, it's about priorities. I'm with you. It's just that no one's looking at all the priorities on the same page. That's all I'm saying. But I'm very sensitive about the sustainability. I am, and I think I've done a good job. I think we've done a good job. I don't mean to say, you know, I mean, that chart alone shows we're not growing. I actually wish, right, if I were a king, that we're at the top of that list, right? I really do. But it's not realistic, and we've been very responsible. So I bristle when I hear someone suggest that I'm irresponsible, because if anything, I think we've held the line, you know, just right. But I'm with you. I don't know. I can't predict.
Clearly, I'm not saying you're.
No, I know you didn't.
I'm interested in the future and how do we handle it. I do think, if I just say, my one other concern, and I think it's brought up, is it's March, the budgets, we've got to start this, you know, I think there's a lot of people here who are involved in this. We have to start this early. And the people are in this room to start this early. The people responsible for the budget. And I agree with George, we need to have municipal and the schools work on this, and they need to not be doing this in March. Because it's late. It's very late. To have an argument, March is too late.
I hear you on that. I've heard that actually. But this is the same timeline we've had for the 11 years I've been superintendent. It's no different this year.
We used to have the budget presented in December, preliminary budget in December, and then it's in January, so we were.
Since John was
The
here.
11 years.
No, but
it's,
since fall, but,
Yeah.
That was 11 years.
yeah.
but when an issue comes up, it's a lot easier if we start doing it soon.
I would not, I mean, I hear Peter, I think we have plenty of time actually, personally, if we actually can get people at the table talking, but I couldn't do it any earlier. I mean, as it is, it's really hard to project, you know, especially in the area of special education, anticipated needs. I think January is too early. But maybe some things, maybe some portion of the budget can be kind of solidified before moving forward. So it's sometimes worth a conversation.
And I think it's worth noting here, especially where we have so many folks in the room and we don't usually have this many folks at our meetings, and we're so pleased to see you, that the Finance and Warrant Commission, we vote on what is presented to us by the town. So when the budget is presented to us in its final version, we vote. We do not make the budget, we vote on the budget. So that is what Peter is speaking to, that the sooner that we can get all of the figures, the easier it is to do our job. But we are not setting the policy. We are asked to vote on the policy. John?
Aaron, I made a recent one. I just want to reiterate a point I made there, which is about what gets presented to you. Right now, the school committee is an elected board with fiscal autonomy and Mass General law. I think right now the budget that we should be deliberating is the budget that's before them, that they presented. So it's kind of a strange dynamic, but putting 4% on a piece of paper doesn't mean much when you have a board that has fiscal autonomy that's talking about a different number. So I mean, it might be semantic, but at some point we need to consider the.
Mary Ann, can I clarify one comment? Per the Education Reform Act 1993, what fiscal autonomy means, John, is that when the legislative body of the town gets an allocation to the school committee, either by town meeting or if it's a city, town, or government, you have fiscal autonomy within that allocation. That's what fiscal autonomy means. You can take your $40 million budget, where everybody else in town has to spend by line items. You have total flexibility. The school committee can go back and take that $40 million and spend it, frankly, any way they want to. The rest of the town does not have that option. But let's be very careful what autonomy means. It's once you have your budget, you then have the autonomy to spend it how you wish.
I understand that, but also an elected board.
So are the selectmen.
Charlie, did you come?
Yes, first, I want to thank you all for all the time you put in, putting all this work together. I'm a newly elected member to the school committee, so I'm learning a lot real fast, a lot to learn. I had 5 kids who went through the school system and 5 more I'm about to. The first thing that struck me as I began to learn what's going on was one of the statistics I saw where the school has annually increased its budget about 3% for, I think the last 12 years. I mean, they have been tightening their belt to support the town with other needs, etc. We are in a competition, we feel, at least in the school committee, when the Boston Magazine publishes what our 3rd grade MCAS are. Are we the best or not the best? And so, I think we have a first-rate fire department, first-rate police department, and municipal government is well run. But we're in a competition. Every real estate agent I hear talks about the fights to buy the house for the education system in the town. So I think the 3%, the belt was tightened, a lot has been done. The second thing I was shocked by is how much of the school budget and the workforce is spent on what would not be considered educational thing. We're a social service agency. So many of our kids come to us who can't be educated traditionally. So all the special needs, and I know because I had kids who were special needs, and they ended up going to college, but I didn't believe it because of the careful thought and attention. And then John said 22 kids can't even be educated in the town. That's 20% of our budget, our base, the increase, is spent on special education. So as we go up, 4%, 20% is basically a social service agency for our kids and our students. And we want a new social work, a new item on the budget. We'll take care of the kids coming out of mental hospitals for problems that exist today that didn't exist 5 years ago. There's all kinds of difficulty. Then there's kids in the school that need counseling who probably will be put in the mental hospital. So this is new. I support that as a new item above all of this unavoidable cost. The second thing, the Student Independent Study Project, that's been run by the teachers. They didn't get paid extra money for it, they just did it on their own to help the kids do something innovative and creative for the economy of the future. Over 40 residents of Westwood volunteered, no money, to support each of these kids. They teach them how to set up a website, how to set up a company. This is as innovative as anybody could ever think of. But it came out of people's idea, their minds. So they want a half a person to help supervise that. To give the kids Chromebooks to get them into the modern world of computers is, that's a good expense. It's a new cost. But if you look at this chart up here, we rank 28th among all of our competitive towns in what our pupil increase has been. So you want to go talk to the people who are paying big taxes in Westwood to be here for education. And the best we've done is increase our budget per pupil. We rank 28th. Now, at our school committee meeting, one parent got up and said, thank you. And this is for you people in the school committee of 20 years ago that set up the system we have today. That the value you're getting out of this system, with great test scores and 97% going and all of this, is because all the hard work and careful thought that has been given over the years. And the concern I have, you have to learn, that when you're ranking 28th among your competitive towns that are good school systems, are we falling off the edge? Because we're not asking for massive increases where we're looking for increases. A lot of them, here's the time, federal regulations, state regulations. But the modest increases, if you really looked at them, what are they going to do and help to maybe help, the 25-person class, they maybe get down to 20. So these are little things that I've learned that are above and beyond just, we're not, just trying to add our budget to our police department, our fire department. We have so much that's out of our control. It's not education. It hits us. And so I think what has been given to us, which is a wonderful school system, but Josepha deserves credit because she's been here the longest. But I do think, my concern is that we're slipping off the edge, that our job is to maintain it so that people here forever maintain this great school system, because what we have today is a gift. And that parent who stood up at our meeting said the value we get in Westwood, the quality of our educational system, if you've done it, we're ranked 28th in the increase. We're not ranked up there Concord, Carlisle, and Weston, and Lexington, but we compete with them on our results. And we're not going to compete. My concern is that we may not compete with them if we don't take this seriously. Thank you for your time.
Any other questions or comments from FinCom?
Yeah.
Yes.
I got my PTA newsletter today, and in the newsletter it said that that FinCom was proposing that we cut the budget by $800,000. And I expressed to you in our meeting that I was concerned about the discourse and the tone that it had taken, and I continue to be concerned by that, because we're not looking to cut $800,000 from your budget. There's a disconnect here. We're not asking you to do anything yet. And so when you stand up and turn around and point to the room and say, everybody here wants to talk, that's great, and I'm so glad that everybody's here, but you scared them into coming, and that is upsetting to me as someone who...
That's not true.
That's
not true. Don't speak for us.
We're
Speak for me.
Folks, we're going to maintain decorum here, so Cindy, please finish your comments.
Cindy, were you going to read what I actually wrote? Because
I know what you
actually
wrote,
disagree,
but that's
yes.
not what went out in our PTA newsletter today,
So
is that you were actually cutting.
I just wanted to record, I would love to read out loud maybe what I wrote. Do you all have copies of it? Because I don't want to be set up like that. I specifically, I was crystal clear with my communication. Couldn't have been any clearer. But I'll look into that. I thought it was just going to be a copy and paste job, so I don't know. I didn't even know that went out.
Like I said, and I've expressed this to you before, I'm concerned about what this is doing. The level of discourse it's frightening that this is what this has come to. And I look to you as a leader to help alleviate some of that.
I would just tell you, I'm equally upset. I don't know if people are getting the impression that I'm not upset by this. We tried talking about the budget with the selectmen on November 9th. Okay? It's on cable TV. That's when we started this conversation, November 9th, 6 PM, right before town meeting started. And it was about partly the operating budget, it was about the long-term capital needs that we haven't even got to here. The school projects, it was about priorities, it was about override, which is not debt exclusion, which is non-debt exclusion, it was all these things. It's been many months, okay? I'm equally upset by the level of discourse. I cannot force the conversation. I don't know what to do. So I'm gonna do what I do well, which is advocate for the Western Public Schools. I have no other skill, clearly. I'm not a mediator and what have you, but I'm gonna continue to do that until someone tells me to stop. That's what I'm paid to do.
I haven't seen what you saw, Cindy,
That's
but I
right.
just want to be clear that, again, this body has no authority to cut the budget. Our role is to vote on the budget that's presented to us. I just want folks to understand that. Any other questions? Yeah, Julie.
In the school committee meetings, I've been to a few, parents come and advocate for things. What are the things that you've heard, either in that forum or in direct communication to you, that relate back to your budget priorities? What are parents asking for? Before we get into the open, I want to hear kind of, as you filtered through, gone through different iterations, whatever you call it, how did you come to these, and how did parents input influence it?
Yeah, I don't, it's funny, I don't know that I would make that like direct line, parents, advocacy,
Well, class size.
Class size, I mean, that's it's a short answer.
Yeah.
Class size is something that
Yeah.
always concerns parents. It only typically bubbles up when it, when it impacts their child and their family. That's, again, it's a pervasive topic of conversation.
Did you hear that at the high
Excuse me,
school?
can I interrupt?
Oh.
I'm sorry that we've got a couple of folks who need to move their cars. Garrett Saru and Paula Mariani.
Why don't you tell me which cars they are?
Red Honda Civic 2638PF and the one EY516. Apparently the police are going to tow your cars, folks. So just handed this note. Red Honda Civic, did we get that? Okay. All right, great. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I'm not saying it isn't, I just didn't know,
Yeah,
are you hearing at the high school level concerns of class size? Are you hearing from parents of
Oh,
special
yeah,
ed?
yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
special ed is a older family.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a process and
Right.
a whole bunch of stuff that we do to kind
Yeah.
of get to a point where it's something we need to end up in the budget or not. Yeah, class size is a frequent topic of conversation. I also say just general programming. We haven't really been able to expand programming like we want to. Although we have tackled, for example, computer science in the last few years, we're hoping to increase, music in this department. We did add SIP, which again, we kind of did on a shoestring budget. So yeah, I mean, program expansion, class size, technology. I mean, people, they want to make sure that we're preparing their students for college and career. I mean, it's kind of that simple. And I think we're doing a good job, and I think, I'd argue, and we've done surveys, I mean, I think our consumers, for lack of a better term, are pretty satisfied, with our product. But it doesn't come easily, and if you start letting it slip, it's going to slip. A lot of us who have, who lived through, the mid-2000s that led to this huge override in 2008, it was really troubling, actually. If you really, I'd love to do a presentation on where we were then and how long it took us to bail out of that. It took us years and years and years. So that's all. It's just trying to keep it at a responsible pace, not go crazy feet of rate, But these last few years, I don't want to call them anomalies, but they're kind of anomalies.
Can I say one more thing? I mean, our subcommittees met with you, we've gone through this book in excruciating detail. I think I know this as well now as I did when I was in the school committee. And I do have to say that they aren't frivolous requests. They are requests that certainly when I was on the school committee, we were looking at 0% budgets, we wouldn't be looking at. But, they're very thoughtful and they are, a lot of them are creative. There are some very creative, like job sharing and, two of the restrictions are kind of to be able to allow the principals to not be teaching. And there are some new programs but it's kind of not up to us to kind of say, oh, you have to cut that item, or you have to cut that item. That's really the school committee. I love the fact everybody's here. Go to your school committee meetings, because literally it's FinCom and, you know, the administration and a couple other people. And literally, you have to go to your school committee meetings. That's the best way. You need to talk to them about what you want, and they are advocating it. But, you know, so we're not going, you know, I do my presentation next week on the budget and our recommendation, but, well, no, it won't be a recommendation next week, it'll just be kind of my version of the budget. But we're not going to be, you know, we're not discussing it now, it's now one position versus another, I would say.
Irina, clarify one thing, the budget we vote on as a committee is the budget that's put forth in the warrant article by the selectmen. So that's why our concern is that we, in fact, the reason we wanted you folks here tonight is to have that resolved before it gets to us, because that's the budget we have to vote. We don't vote on your request, we vote on the budget that's set forth by the selectmen.
Well, hopefully we'll have a meeting with the selectmen before our next school committee. That's what we're hoping for.
When is your next school committee?
Our next school committee meeting is
March 23rd. Okay. Let me just make sure I've got all the questions from FinCom. Yes? Okay. Open it up to residents. Yes, ma'am? And please identify yourself by name and where you live.
I'm Cinda Liddy, and I live on Dover Road. So just as an example of the deferred needs that have been really kicked down the road, when I was a parent of elementary school students, I was on the K-12 Science and Technology Review Committee. And one of the things we did ask for was a science coordinator, because when you looked at other towns, we looked at what some of the top schools were doing, they had additional resources on science. That was like 2008 or so. Every year, it got kicked down the road. So I'm just saying that for this budget, this may be 6% this year, but there are many years where it was 0%. And these things, as you know, my children in elementary school, one of them's in college now. That kid will never benefit from this, right? So I think that's an example of a very much of a deferred need. There are also things that are not in the budget that would have very much benefited the high school students, which would include additional resources on the computer science and engineering side of the high school. And those have been turned down as well. So I'm just saying that if we want to prepare our students for this 21st century world in which these types of skills are really needed, then I think we do need to plan for these things and not continue to kick down these needs down the road.
Yes.
Christina Martin, 23 Brookfield Road. I just want to say that I moved here 8 years ago, and the only reason I came to Westwood was for the schools. I didn't come here for the great fire department or police department or the potential for shopping. I came here for the schools. So this is not the area, I think, to be frugal with. This is a place where it makes sense committing our time and dollars.
Any other comments? Yes, sir?
Yes, so my name is Michael Dunn, Sandy down the road. I wasn't really going to make a statement on whether the 4% or the 6% is correct, but I was trying to take a wider perspective. And I think it's a bit unfair to have a narrative that it's been kicking the can down the road, or that it's been lean times, really. Because financially speaking, if you look back the last 10 years, the school budget is up $15 million. And that's from $27 million in 07 to 42 proposed this year. And the town budget over that same 10 years has gone up by $20 million. So the school budget has gone up by 75% of the total increase in the town budget over the last 10 years. And the school budget over that time has gone up by over 50%, as the math would imply. And where I'm really going with that whole thing is, I think it's a society issue overall, whereby if healthcare costs are going up at 10% a year, which they have for the last 20 years, and college costs have been going up 8% a year for the last 30 years,
and then a local school budget is going up by 6%. Well, and wages in the private sector are really going up 0. No wonder people are feeling squeezed. And that's part of the problem, and that's part of the societal issues we face. So I'm not taking a stand on whether 4% or 6% is the correct number, but I don't think it's fair to say that the town has not spent and increased money and funding on the school system to a very, very significant degree. So I think it's better to say we spent a lot of money on the schools, and if we want to spend more, then that's a more accurate description of what's actually occurring. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Joe Genta, Fox Hill Street. I just want to commend John for taking the time to be transparent with all of us as parents and laying out his budget in a high degree of detail. And I understand FinCom is in a tough spot. You guys got to make tough decisions on behalf of the town. And you're handed, you're dealt the hand that the town's giving you. The selectmen give you this hand, you're dealt with it, and that's a tough place to be. You're kind of in the middle of all of this. But I guess as parents and taxpayers, the concerns we've had over the years is the lack of transparency in other departments of this town. I have a proposal here to vote on a new police station that I have no idea how this started, what the process was, what the expenses are, and if there's been any other solutions proposed as alternatives to this system. And we have a new fire department. Never any transparency about that. This library, it was given to us at the very last, at the 23rd hour to make a decision on the library that seems to be very underutilized. And my question is, how long of a process do we need to go through this with the other parts of this town? Can we get more transparency? If there's any selectmen in this room, can you please provide more transparency in the future on the process, top to bottom, not just bring it forward at the town meeting. There are priorities. Everyone's got an axe to grind. I understand that. The parents do communicate to the Board of Education, but we don't really communicate to the selectmen. We've never had much interaction with the FinCom committee. So there's kind of a, as parents and taxpayers, we have a face-to-face with the school committee. We never have a face-to-face with the FinCom. We never have a face-to-face with the selectmen. So there's other parts of the budget that get passed right over our heads that we never get a chance to look at or comment on. John took the effort to bring us here to hear the process. He presented his budget to you. We got to hear it in his words, and it opened up our eyes to what his process was and how it worked. And it'd be better for all of us in this town to see this happen across the board.
Thank you, sir, for that comment. I will let folks know that our meetings are always open to the public. They're televised. In fact, we've tried rather unsuccessfully to get folks to come in the past, and we've tried putting notices in the paper and online. So we're really delighted to see so many of you here tonight, and we welcome you at all of our meetings where the department heads do come to us throughout the year as we start to talk about the budget. I just want to reply to one other thing, sir. Not to get off topic, the issues about the police station and the fire station, I can tell you, have been discussed here at great length for years. George Hertz here has served on the Public Safety Facilities Task Force. So that has really been the subject of a lot of discussion in this public forum, and we would be happy to provide you with more information. I don't want to get off topic, which is the schools here. But I appreciate your comment. I want to make sure I get to other folks who are raising their hands here. If other folks have something new to offer. Yes, sir.
Hi, Peter Bean, Hatton Street. I grew up in Westwood. I'm going to go at feet first. There's people in this room that I've known for a very long time. I appreciate everything that FinCom does. My dad sat at that table, my brother sat at that table. It's a tough and thankless job, so thank you for doing it. I appreciate you hearing out John today. I think from a very big picture, from what John has laid out today, the challenge that we're going to have is if we don't keep up. Westwood has, my mother sold real estate in this town for 25 years. My brother's been selling for 20 plus. The main tenet of everybody moving to this town, barring a very few, is the educational system here. That's it, hands down. For your typical students and your special needs students. I'm the father of a very special needs child who's in Deerfield right now. My wife and I spent the equivalent of probably 3 weeks' worth of work last year fighting for something very, very small, very small. Considering what we're all paying in taxes, I thought it was an embarrassment to the town. It's not John's fault because his hands are tied on the budget. However, if we see Westwood, the town of Westwood start to slip, and we start getting results like some of our neighboring towns, it's directly going to affect the home values here, and it's directly going to affect the tax base. So looking forward, I think it's very prudent to look very hard at this budget that's been proposed, because without the school system here in Westwood, and as you mentioned, nobody's moving here because they want to be close to Home Goods. No one's moving here because of a fabulous new police station. I can say that, and half the guys on there, buddies of mine I grew up with. But it's the school system in the proximity to Boston that drive people to this town, but the school system far and away. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Sophia Bartholomew, Long Meadow Drive. I just want to address the young woman now. I'm sorry, I can't see that far. I see your name. I'm not scared to coming here. I read an email that said shade from proposed budget. Didn't say cut the budget. There was none of that hysterical hysteria that you described. I didn't read it in the PTO letter. I didn't read it in the PTA letter. I was sitting at Kiara with a friend having a drink, and I said, oh, look at that email. I better get my butt to that meeting. And that's really how that came down. I appreciate everybody, and I know some of you personally. It's a tremendous amount of work. But as Mr. Bean said, I came here from the schools too. And I lived in Medfield. So what does that tell you? I should go back. I have 3 girls out of the schools.
Their per pupil costs.
Yeah, right. I have 3 kids out of the schools in great colleges, some out of college, I have 1 more on an IEP. I get it. But nobody in this room, I don't believe, I can actually speak for all of you. We're scared. No, we're not scared. We're concerned. John brought it to the table. He brought it to our attention. Here we are. That's it.
Yes, sir.
Billy Muttaya, 132 Willett Circle. I'm an economist by training. I work for a fantastic firm. And I think when we say that we should increase budget by about 2.5%, inflation, if you believe that, that's a joke. It's really, if you really take it at the inflation, it could be anywhere from 2.5 to 5%. Teachers are our front line, right? With my son, I have 1 son. I came here 8 years ago, now he's 6 years. He's in kindergarten. The teacher, we're supposed to give our kids to the teachers for 6 hours a day, and we are getting really good quality of education, right? John is the captain of his ship. It's a tough job for John, right? He has to garner the resources. He has to trickle the staff. He has to keep them happy. He has to make sure that everything works like clockwork. And he needs the dollars to do it. I know all of you have a tough job. You are the protectors of the town budget in a way, that you make sure that we do not live within a power. We live within us, right? But do please keep your eyes and ears open. We live in a competitive economy, right? We do compete for resources across other towns. So please value our teachers. They do a good job, and they should be compensated adequately, right? But keep in mind, we have to be sustainable, right? So please keep your eyes and your ears and your hearts and your minds open to this budget, right? And just try to find the best compromise. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm Joe from 21 West, from 21 Dover Road, Westwood. I newly moved to Westwood, and I came here like many other parents because one of the best school systems in this town. Also, I would like to say I'm an accounting professor. I'm fully aware of how difficult to set up the budget, teach the work of Susan and John. And I'm an administrator because I chair the Department of Accounting and Finance and Real Math Numbers. And I know sitting on that table is also not an easy job. And I appreciate work. And I want to say that please don't view school system as a cost center. As that gentleman said, 2/3 of the budget has gone to the school system. Please don't view it as cost center. Please view it as a revenue center. We came here because of the school system, and we pay property tax. And I'm aware of that. A large proportion of the town's revenue came from the property tax, right? We came here with taxpayers because of the school. So I would suggest you, when you are looking at the budget, please view it as a profit center, not only a cost center. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard? Yes, Charlie.
I'd just like to respond to Jean's question about how do we get decisions and what comes from the audience. And I think at our last school committee meeting, there was a real drilling done of Abby Hemstrom about why do we need a social worker? What do we need a social worker for? And so she gave this detailed description of what it's like to be in a high school today, with the kids coming out of hospitals, not for broken legs, but for mental. So when she got through, two parents got up to the audience who just kind of didn't know each other. And one guy said, when I put my daughter to bed at night, I'm so worried about her future. But when I hear this person talking like this, being prepared, knowing what's going on, it just makes me feel so much better. The second parent got up and said the same thing. So, you know, behind closed doors, all this detailed work being done is just absolutely amazing. Things that no one here will ever hear about. But it's preparing for, the society we're in today.
Thank you. Just want to try to limit the comments to anything new. If you have something new to add, Jan? Yes.
Wendy Thornton from Westview Terrace. I wanted to just add that I am a high school social worker. I'm also a parent of a special ed student who I moved here when I was pregnant for the good school system, not knowing how much I would utilize the programs. I have a kid that went through the STAR program at the Downey School. I fully believe that because of the preventative work that the school system has done, has kept my son from being an out-of-district kid. And so when John talks about 22 to 24 kids, that's an actual much lower number than a lot of our other towns. My town, I think, has about 40 kids that are out of district. We work really hard, and I think Westwood has over the years, to pull students back in because of their programs that they've implemented from K through 12 to bring students back to save us money. When I heard from a neighbor that that Westwood doesn't have a social worker, I was appalled. I'm one of 3 in a high school at Walpole High. Our middle schools each have a social worker plus a guidance counselor in both of our middle schools. We have specialized programs that I think other schools will work on, but I also spoke to someone at the Westwood Youth and Family because I thought Westwood was like Brookline High that has the BRIGHT program, which utilizes a mental health facility in their high school, and I thought that's what Westwood Youth and Family, I just assumed that because they're in the school, but when I spoke to someone, they were like, we're there to treat the students as clients. We don't see extra students. Our adjustment counselor has 48 504s that she sees, many of which are for counseling. Our school psychologist picks up counseling and also does all of his testing. I'm in a specialized program within the setting, and up until this year we had an alternative high school on our campus that provided social work. But we don't just deal with the multitudes of kids that go to hospitalizations. 25 is an average, sadly. We work with the kids that have school avoidance, the high anxiety, that struggle coming to school. We work with the kids that I work with kids that are in AP classes to what you guys have is CP3. I have kids from really strong families to really fractured families. Mental health runs across the board, whether you are financially stable or not, whether you have parents that are involved in school or not. And I think it is a travesty that Westwood doesn't have a social worker in school. So I would implore, I will go to the school committee. I apologize that I've never been. I will be there at the next meeting, but I think it's a mental health component is so important for our school system, for our kids. Thank you.
Yes.
7 Bloomhonet Road. Yeah, Dr. Andalucci and present to us, and we get the email and then come over to listen to his presentation. It's very reasonable, the item that he break down. So, so the school is the first part, is the priority issue. And I can hear the committee is kind of like a little bit upset with how we present, but if we get a better school system and then attract more people to live in this town and then get more tax revenue, and then we don't fight for the fire department or like police department also fight for the pizza, just one pizza, 6 inches. If the service is great, and then attract people to move in, and then the pizza from 6 inches to 9 inches, and then the revenue will be more. And of course, it's still, you know, the budget has to, like, you guys sit down to discuss it, and that's what you guys' job. So we really agree on Dr. Andalucci presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We do need to start wrapping this up, so unless folks have something new to add, I think what I want to do is give John an opportunity to respond. If you had any further thoughts for us.
I think that's it.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to give you a chance.
I just want to reiterate, we are 100% committed to going, like I said, back to the drawing board. This was never meant to be a final budget. In fact, we talked a lot about the process of the year. I don't know why the pitch, really. So I can tell you that the school committee is committed to chipping away at this a little bit. At the same time, I think it'd be a huge disservice to students in the community if we kind of try to land on this arbitrary 4%. But at the same time, we need to have a dialogue. I'll leave it at that, and we're hopeful it can happen. We want it to happen. It's very upsetting to us and everybody else, and we'll go from there. But I appreciate your time. I appreciate you listening to us, and stay tuned.
Well, thank you very much.
Can I just ask a question? Sorry, and if this is better, so I'm David Russell, I live on 23 Highview Street, and I'm another parent who moved here for the schools. So maybe it'd be better for one person to tell me, but would it make sense for someone to say what the sort of next steps in this process are? Because I'm not quite understanding when you said John's making a presentation about the school budget, and yet it sounds like you give a thumbs up, thumbs down on the budget as a whole and not about this. Just, is it worth clarifying some of that?
The school committee is hoping to meet with the selectmen before our next school committee meeting. At the next school committee meeting, the school committee will be deliberating on the proposed budget and hopefully making some adjustments to it.
Will we get an update sent to us through town?
Sure.
Does the selectmen give the number? Is that what I was understanding?
No, we present a number to town meeting.
Okay.
Now, we also present that number to the FinCom,
Yeah,
and
we
then the
vote on the
FinCom
number
will.
the selectmen give us.
Yeah.
You vote on the number the selectmen give you. Okay.
I think very importantly, just to help answer the process question too, and this is what George is alluding to, and very importantly, you could come to a scenario where at town meeting, where we're effectively amending the budget on town meeting floor. Right. Nobody
Wants to do that.
Nobody wants to do that. I want to be crystal clear about that. That being said, if that public dialogue needs to happen on town meeting floor, that's what has to happen. It has to be before that.
Yeah.
I think we all agree. But process-wise, that's happened. The district I came from, that happened every year. And it's tough, but at the same time,
Hopefully the selectmen will be meeting with us before, right, Mike?
Can that be communicated to all of us when that meeting is?
Mike Wall.
How the notices go out?
Town
website has all meetings.
We will advertise that, yeah.
Okay, well, again, we want to thank those of you who came out for this issue. We're about to move to the planning board, and you're all welcome to stay for that. Don't feel you have to leave. Thank you very much for
Excuse me, your next one has
338PM,
Oh, God.
or a 1EY516, I don't know what the numbers are. So I can add to my
Good evening, thank you. I'm Ashley Kate. For the record, I'm the town planner, and with me here tonight are a couple members of the planning board. In the front row is Vice Chairman Stephen Olna and Jeff Wigan.
Can I just say, absolutely not. Well, relax.
I'm sorry, so I don't know if everyone heard that, but Stephen Olna, Vice Chairman of the Planning Board, is here tonight, and Jeff Wigan as well, and I'm Abby McCabe, the Town Planner. Unfortunately, the other members of the Planning Board, Bruce Montgomery and Trevor Lobenstein and Chairman Chris Papp, were unable to be here tonight. But I'm here to present the 7 Planning Board zoning amendment articles. The Planning Board opened their public hearing on the zoning amendments on February 9th and continued that hearing to the February 23rd meeting. So what you have in your booklet tonight is the revised version from what you had seen in the initial advertisement, because it had changed a little bit after their public hearings. The first article presented by the Planning Board is related to senior housing. This article specifically relates to the existing senior residential development bylaw that we have today, is in section 8.4. The proposal, this amendment proposes revising that section by incorporating it into the previous section 8.3, which is our open space residential bylaw. We often call it the OSRD, and then that would delete the old senior residential SRD section of the bylaw. The purpose of this amendment is to create a new zoning mechanism to allow for the development and construction of senior housing in Westwood. Also to try to encourage housing for seniors that is more compatible with the environment and sensitive to neighborhoods, to provide a technical guidance for appropriate growth of housing in Westwood, provide that guidance to developers as well as to the planning board, and to promote quality design through the planning board's public review process. Why are we proposing this article? Over the last few years, we've had significant interest from both Westwood residents calling the town, asking if we had any opportunities for housing for seniors, or what we are trying to do to encourage more housing for seniors, as well as we've had interest from developers interested in creating senior housing. Over the last few years, we've had several applications. Some of them were informal, came to the planning board as concept plans, and then some of them actually submitted full applications. And unfortunately, none of them were successful. And ultimately, that led to a very frustrating and cumbersome process to everyone involved, really, to the developers, as well as to the board members, and to residents and neighbors of these proposed projects. So if you recall, a year ago at annual town meeting, after the planning board had reviewed a few of these applications, which were ultimately withdrawn, they weren't successful because the planning board felt many of these applications came in with very high unit counts, very tall buildings, that the planning board did not feel was very considerate to the land that they were proposed on, or to the neighborhood. So it was really dividing the neighborhoods. Last year when the planning board had proposed a moratorium, that was not successful at town meeting, but since that time the planning board created a subcommittee and has been working to really look at the existing bylaw, the senior residential section, and then our bylaw as a whole, at what works and what doesn't work. And what we found that the existing SRD, the existing senior residential development bylaw, was ineffective. We know this because it's been in place since 2003, and we've only had one application that was approved. That's Reynolds Farm on High Street, and that's currently under construction right now. In that time, we had one other application that was approved, but that was never constructed on High Street. It's now owned by Hale Reservation. Previous to that, we had the SRD used to be a special residence district for elderly housing, and we've only had that was on the books since the 70s, and we've only had Westwood Glen approved under that. So we've had this option in our zoning for a very long time without having these projects come through. And so when the planning board and the senior housing subcommittee looked at this, we felt that our zoning bylaw should give clear guidance to people looking at our bylaw of what we would like to see, and then also for the planning board to know what's appropriate when they have these applications in front of them. Because what we'd like to see is we think that there is a need for senior housing in town, given the demographics alone. In the next few years, by 2020, the baby boomers will all be over 55, between 55 and 75, and these people will need a place to live. So the planning board is now before you with this new amendment to create a new zoning path to help develop this senior housing. What is senior housing? Senior housing can take many forms, but in our bylaw that's proposed, this amendment, we define age-restricted housing as housing where at least one resident is 55 years or older. And then the housing that is usually designed for or attractive to seniors is typically affordable, often have community amenities such as community space or a clubhouse. Will be near public transportation or will often provide its own transportation network. How can communities encourage senior housing? And that's done through zoning. We don't build the housing, but we create the zoning that will guide that growth, and that's what this proposal is doing. There's different ways, such as senior housing districts, residential retirement communities, which is actually what we do have. We have that in our bylaw, and that's how Fox Hill Village is developed as a retirement community. And there's also multifamily districts, which is what we have at University Station. There's mixed-use districts, which we do have our flexible multiple-use overlay districts that do allow housing. Those are in the areas of Washington Street, High Street, and then in the Glacier Drive area near Frugal Families. And then what we're proposing in this article is a mix of incentive zoning as well as this cluster open space zoning. Why the open space residential district? So we've had this open space and residential district. The town adopted it in 2010. We've had a few subdivision applications come in under this. It's been single family. But this proposal is to expand on that by adding a special permit use category to allow age-restricted housing and allow for a bonus in dwelling units to add that incentive for people to apply under this bylaw. So we felt that the open space residential district was a good place for this because the primary goals and purpose of the open space residential bylaw is to conserve the environment and to protect the land by reducing the disturbance on the land because it requires less impervious surface, gives more flexibility to the planning board to reduce roadway width, reduce the amount of pavement, and then there's also open space requirements. So it tries to keep the impact on the environment for more compact development to allow this permanent protection of open space within the project. And we are expanding on this by also having a design review process. This amendment also includes expanding on the design process by looking at the accessibility of the proposed units for the special permit for age-restricted housing. Also requires affordable units to be provided, starting at any projects that are proposed with 8 or more units would have to provide an affordable housing component of that. And they would also carefully look at the layout, and then they'd also like to see community aspects such as a community center included to make sure it's really meeting the goals. The existing open space residential bylaw that we have now, and this age-restricted housing would only be allowed in the single residence B, the SRC, the single residence C zone, and the single residence E zone. So those are our 3 zoning districts, single-family residential districts that have the largest lot sizes. If you can see from the map, the SRC is that light yellow, zone, and then the SRE is that kind of turquoise blue. That's the majority of the town. And then the SRB is that dark yellow color. So this is a change because the existing senior residential bylaw can be applied for throughout the town in all residential districts. This proposed amendment is limited to these 3 zones that the planning board feels the most appropriate for this kind of development because they typically have larger lot sizes and more land area. So what's being removed is the areas around the general residence area and residential district around the Islington, Washington Street area, as well as the SRB zone around around the high school because we did not feel that this was suitable locations for this because they just did not have enough room for these developments. They're also served by our flexible multiple use overlay districts along Washington Street and High Streets that would allow for more housing opportunities. And then new also with this proposal is the applications, you could not apply for it unless you met these minimum lot size requirements. So in the SRB, it's 120,000 square feet, which is a little under 3 acres. And then it's 200,000 square feet in SRC and 400,000 square feet in the SRE, which is a little under 10 acres. What is the density? The open space residential bylaw is a good fit for this age-restricted housing because it has a very clear step-by-step formula of how much can be built on the land. So in the existing bylaw, it already has a step-by-step process where you look at the proposed land area, then you take out 100% for the wetlands and any undevelopable land. Then you take out, reduce that by 10% infrastructure factor, divide by the minimum lot size, and then that will get you your base density in the open space bylaw of what you can build. And then this amendment proposes adding the step 6. So if you're doing age-restricted housing, it would be the times that by 3 to have the bonus units as an added incentive. So for example, on the right, there's a hypothetical situation where if you have a 5-acre lot with an acre of wetlands, you could, when you go through the calculations, you could have a maximum of 20 dwelling units. That would be 15 for the density bonus for the age-restricted housing, plus the 5 you would get if you were just doing a straight OSRD. But this would result in a maximum of 20 age-restricted housing units, and all of those units would have to be age-restricted. Also, this amendment proposes a new application procedure. Currently, the senior housing residential district is a special permit. That is staying the same. It's still a special permit. Special permits are a discretionary review by the planning board. It requires a higher scrutiny than if you're proposing a by right development, such as office in a commercial district. That use itself is considered by right because it may not be the trigger. But for this special permit, the age-restricted housing would be the trigger for that higher level of review. So this amendment is still a special permit, but we've expanded upon the findings a bit by requiring a fiscal impact report to be submitted to the planning board. So that way the planning board can take a careful look to make sure that there's going to be no negative impacts on the town. And they want to make sure that there is a need for this housing before it gets approved. But the proposal also adds in 2 steps before that. That's the first step would be for applicants looking to do the age-restricted special permit to first come to town staff to have a meeting to initially review the suitability of the land and to review the density. The land use committee is comprised of staff. It's essentially the planning board's review staff that review all their applications, but they meet on a regular basis. So it's the community director, community planning director, the town engineer, public works director, public safety officer, and fire chief are there as well. And at that meeting, that would give them an initial review. They would write a recommendation to the planning board. It would be a non-binding recommendation, but at least applicants, when they first approach the town, they would at least have a good sense of the zoning before first applying to the planning board. And then the next step would be a preliminary review with the planning board. Now this would be a public hearing. The primary purpose is for the planning board to set the maximum densities, just to really look at the suitability of the land, if what they're proposing makes sense. They would review that. It wouldn't it wouldn't give any authority for the applicants to move forward with the building or construction, but it's really just to help facilitate applications as they move forward. So they would want to know what that maximum density is before they move into the next step. That way, it's clear moving forward. They can work out any issues that may come up in the preliminary review prior to applying for the final special permit stage. And to summarize, this amendment, we're trying to encourage senior housing by allowing for an incentive, by allowing this density bonus for age-restricted housing. We believe it provides more clear guidance to everyone, to developers and builders looking at our zoning. They can review clearly what the planning board is looking for, and it has clear guidance for the planning board when they're reviewing applications. And we have that clear step-by-step density formula. They can easily tell when a property is being overdeveloped. Also, we've added the minimum lot size requirements, the affordable requirement, the fiscal impact statement that we believe will help produce better results and an improved process. The preliminary stage process will help applicants before they come to the full special permit, the final stage.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions for FinCom, Marjorie?
Under our current SRD bylaw, do we have a minimum tract size?
No, we do not. So the minimum lot size is new.
When we examined the town map and we've looked at the SRD, C and E, on those tract size requirements we're now going to have, do we have many parcels of those sizes, or are we going to be looking at people trying to buy multiple parcels and combine them?
It would likely be a combination. It would be a combination because the minimum lot size in the SRC zone is 40,000 square feet. So you can't apply under this special permit until you have that.
The 5 acres.
Yeah. So it would have to be a combination of lots.
But do we have any tracts right now in these districts that are of that size already, without somebody having to try and
Yes,
pick up
we do.
multiple pieces?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
When you took a look at this, did you look at the potential ones, the tracks that are out there that are potential, that have been discussed maybe in the past or might be coming up and can fit into this? Obviously you can't go through until unless you have a design in place or start having an application.
Right, we did look at that. I know 215 High Street was one of the applications that was before the planning board in 2015, and that's 8.5 acres. Just when we reviewed under this bylaw, that would result in approximately 20 to 24 units. When they first came in for that project, I think it was around over 70. So that's why we think this formula gets us at least to what we feel is a more appropriate proposal. Because the existing senior residential bylaw really didn't give much guidance. It just left the density to be developed, to be determined by the planning board. So people would come in with their proposals, and then it was very tough for the planning board to really say yes or no.
Any questions or comments from residents on this article? Yes, sir.
Edward Musto, 36 Woodville Drive. And as the board knows, I am the holder of the sole senior residential permit in this town. I've looked at the work that the planning board has done, and I know it's very well intended, but I don't think it improves the viability of senior housing. When you start prohibiting it in A districts, when you start prohibiting in districts that don't have the tracts, that don't have the required minimum area size, you're actually shrinking the availability of locations where one could build senior housing. We've had one project approved in 10 years.
I don't see people lining up at the gates to propose more senior housing. The one project that Abby mentioned, it was a little bit outrageous, they were trying to put 71 units on 8.5 acres, but unfortunately, they were trying to put 50 of those units in a 3-story apartment building. And I think banning that type of design structure is good. I think it's good for the neighborhoods, I think it's good for seniors, I think it's good for the towns. But I think what's happening is with the new requirements for area, the lack of locations, because we don't have that many areas in town where one can meet the area requirements. We just don't have them. You're taking potential locations out of play. Seniors live everywhere in this town. They live in A districts, they live in B districts, they live in C districts, D's, E's, they live everywhere. And now we're saying, you can't have it in an A district, you can't have it in the general district, and for any of the other districts, you have to have a minimal lot size. I don't think we should be limiting it to a minimal lot size. And that's my biggest objection with this proposal. And as far as the density bonus, at one time you could build up to 16 units on an acre of land, okay? And to be realistic, 16 is not a realistic number because you're gonna run out of space, horizontal space, before you get 16 units, okay? So I think it's good that they have a new formula for determining the number of units. I think it's a little bit too restrictive. I think we've gone from a regulation that had 3.5 pages, a bylaw that had 3.5 pages, to one that has 18 pages now, maybe, with all the different compliance points along the way. I think we just made it too complicated. I think it was fine the way it was. I don't think we have to change it to this new process. For all intents as it may be, I just don't think it's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I wonder if maybe briefly, Abby or the planning board respond to those concerns? Perhaps the rationale behind those portions of the article?
Sure, we did review that, and we think the minimum lot size was a very important piece of this amendment because we were getting proposals for what we felt was overdeveloped in these smaller, still large lots, but they were proposing more than we thought would really fit in. And we think some of those, the general residence district and the smaller SRB and the SRA were smaller lots, and it wasn't appropriate to have these multifamily projects proposed there. For example, 866 Gay Street was another one. I don't believe they submitted a formal application, but we did, and we have had a lot of inquiries at that location. That's under 3 acres. I think it's 2.8 acres. And we did have a proposal for a dozen units or so. Under this new bylaw, you cannot apply this zone. That zone is not. You can't apply for this. It doesn't apply to that, so that would wipe out that location.
Actually, I saw another hand, if you don't mind. Was there a question in the back?
I think she just pretty much answered. Steve Schwartz, High Street. I think, to Ed's point, I don't think they've made it a more cumbersome law with multiple pages. I think they've kind of honed it down to one document, which seems to make sense to me, put it all into one proposal basically, where it gives you the option for open, once you do the open space, it gives you the option for senior residential to build off that. So I don't see it as more cumbersome. I see it as more definitive in terms of opportunity as well.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Basic one question. I know traditionally, if I recall correctly, that we really hope to have our senior residential developments within walking distance of our town areas. I think it was built into the bylaw previously, was it?
It was recommended.
It was recommended. Are we still in that direction as well, or are we moving away from that direction?
think what we're missing here is, we still have another thing, which is the FMUOD developments where you do apartments in those towns. You know, it's not different than we're looking at one now. And those, in some cases, they could be senior residential developments. In one case down there where we specifically make a change to allow that. And that's the kind of thing that it would be good for seniors, even if it isn't restricted for seniors. So aside of that, like that way.
Anything else new on this, Peter?
Does this article affect Mr. Musto's current property or is he grandfathered? Yes. No effect.
It would be grandfathered.
But it will affect my next proposal, in the sense that, yes, it does meet the 200,000 square foot minimum lot size. However, if you apply the new formula, it will reduce the number of the yield which could be received from that parcel. It will also, it will be an affordable component to the process. I guess my question is, why is it that the seniors, or the senior proposals are the ones that are getting the most scrutiny? And why is it that the senior proposals are the ones who are maybe footing the bill for affordable housing in town? And there are lots of housing, there's lots of housing in town. But it seems like they're latching on to the senior proposals to subsidize affordable housing. I mean, I've been contributing to the Affordable Housing Fund with my project. On average, I contribute $5,200 from the sale of each unit to the Affordable Housing Fund. No one else has done that in town, okay? I just don't see why it's, you know, it seems like the senior proposals are the ones getting the short end of the stick here. Real estate sells, why don't we have a tax on, you know, on the transfer of real estate? Say, okay, a percentage of this from the sale of real estate goes to Westwood's affordable housing needs, okay, so that everybody shares in supporting affordable housing. It seems like they're zoning, you know, they're honing in or focusing on senior housing, and I don't think that's fair.
It's just simply not true. All housing developments of retentions are required to do affordable housing as a component of the project. Ed chose not to do that and make a contribution to a fund. His contribution to the fund is generous, but it's far less than it would be if he had to provide those uses.
It was at a time when I wasn't obligated to contribute to the fund because it wasn't a requirement of the approval.
For senior at that time, it was a requirement for all other housing types at that time. So his point is entirely the opposite of what the reality is.
Okay, I think we should probably move on. It is getting late, and I know you've got several other articles. Okay. Thank you.
The next planning board article, this is regarding the outdoor seating. This amendment proposes allowing outdoor seating as an accessory use. Currently, our bylaw allows for outdoor seating for restaurants, which by definition are where meals are prepared and served on the premises. That's allowed through a special permit from the planning board. However, we don't actually have anything in our bylaw that allows outdoor seating for non-restaurant uses. So anything such as takeout locations, ice cream shops, coffee shops. So this amendment would really legalize in our zoning outdoor seating. And then it would also, we've added in a process that first they would need any applications would need prior approval from the town planner, that they would, all seating would need to have 6 feet of clearance for safe passage for people to walk, that the seating would be protected from vehicles with bollards or fencing or curb stops, but they would have appropriate noise and, noise barriers or, hours, we look at that, and then lighting that meets our zoning bylaw, that they would still have to meet sufficient parking, and that the area would be well maintained. And then once approved, it would be enforced on a regular by the zoning enforcement officer. So essentially, this proposal is to legalize outdoor seating in our zoning bylaw for existing businesses and then new ones coming in.
Questions from FinCom? Questions or comments from residents?
Who's our zoning enforcement officer? Is that the building?
Oh, sorry, yes, the building commissioner is also the zoning enforcement officer.
Okay, I think we're good on that one. Thank you.
This third article, this amendment amends several places in the zoning bylaw, so this was kind of getting at what we were just talking about. This is an amendment to amend the affordability requirements in our flexible multiple use overlay bylaw, the University Ave mixed use overlay, the existing senior residential district if Article 1 does not pass, and then also this is proposed as part of our amended OSRD that we outlined in Article 1. We currently, as Jack had mentioned, and for any projects where 10 or more units are residential units are proposed, we currently require 50% of those units to be affordable. However, we don't specify how one should round that when it's when it comes out to be a decimal. So in practice, we had generally rounded down when it was under 0.5 and rounded up in the past, but we, during the planning board public hearing, we did coordinate with the housing authority, and they had some recommendations, so we did make some revisions since your initial review. So this amendment includes a chart, so we took out the 15% and included the chart to specify how many units, how many affordable units are required based on the total number of units proposed. So when you have under 7 units, there would be no affordable requirement, but we'd start requiring them at 8, which is lower than what we have today, where we start at 10. So 1 between 8 and 9, 2 units between 10 and 15, 3 between 16 and 20, total 22 units proposed, 4 when it's between 23 and 26, and then when it's over 27, we would just 15% and round up in all cases. This bylaw also added some language that the affordable units must be affordable in perpetuity. We have been acting in that practice, but realized it was not actually in the bylaw, so we're adding that language. And then I think last time we were here in January, you had asked about if there was some flexibility. The language is clear that the affordable units should be provided within the project, but if it's not, it would have to be approved by the planning board and consult with the housing authority on that. And then essentially we think lowering that number to start requiring them at the 8 is better for our goals to stay above the 10% that's required on our housing inventory.
Questions from FinCom? Yeah.
For the units that are to remain in perpetuity, how is that going to be by deed restriction?
Yes, I believe that's how we do it.
And how will that be monitored?
Usually we have a monitoring agency. Is it usually the housing authority or the housing partnership?
It's a deed restriction.
But who's going to monitor
Well,
that
they
it's
monitor.
being sold to another?
They do that,
The lawyer.
they monitor who it, I mean, they have to go to the housing authority.
They need
for
a
any
certificate
affordable
from the housing authority?
Yeah, so they're constantly doing that every time.
And would there be an inflation provision if they're transferred the property?
So if something is sold,
Something was sold, right?
yes, you can't sell for a profit.
Well, I mean, it would have to make capital improvements or anything, and are they able to recoup that?
Nora, can you help?
There are 2 different kinds of affordable units, depending on the type of development. We have affordable units in town
that are homeowner units that were built as part of subdivisions. We also have affordable units that are apartment units that are built within the apartment complex. It's the number of units that have to remain affordable units in perpetuity. If it's a single-family house, it's an affordable house, it can be sold to another affordable family, or if an affordable family does not come forward to purchase that house, then it can be sold to the town, or it can be sold to another party, and the difference in the price between market rate and affordable gets turned back to the town to purchase another affordable unit. So that's how we handle it if it's a homeownership affordable unit. If it's a rental affordable unit, then that number of apartments in a complex have to stay affordable. So for instance, University Station has 350 apartments, 69 of those are required to be affordable units. It's not a particular unit. Units can move from time to time as people move in and out, but that project will forever have to have 69 affordable units offered to people who qualify.
And what happened if they condo those units?
They would still have to have 69 of them, which would be affordable. Then
So how
those-
would they determine which 69?
Which would be, they would have to come to the town and they would have to file an application to change their approval. So right now, they are an apartment building, and they have what's called a local initiative program that's been approved by the town for that building. And if they want to do something different, they need to come back and ask for an amended approval. And the town would then bring their proposal to the Department of Housing and Community Development. And if it met the state's conditions, then the town could consider making that change. The reason that we do this, I think it's important to remember, is to stay above 10% affordable housing in Westwood on the subsidized housing index. By staying above 10%, we are not susceptible to unfriendly 40B projects. We're above 10% now, but as new units are developed, we might fall below that. Most housing developments in town are 10 units or fewer. We've had somewhere between 70 and 80 units have been developed, single-family units have been developed in Westwood since the last census. When the next census comes around, we will be obligated to provide 10% of those homes as affordable homes in order to maintain our 10% affordable housing on the SHI. So we are constantly looking for new units to keep us above 10%. Whenever there's a special permit issued in the town, whether it's an OSRD special permit, if it's a senior housing special permit, if it's a flexible multiple use overlay district special permit, or in the case of the University Station project, it's not even a special permit, it's just an approval. It's built in there that there's a percentage of units that have to be affordable. And that intention is to keep us staying above 10%, to make up for all the straight subdivision units that are developed in town that are not affordable. So it's a constant strive to stay above that, otherwise we are susceptible once again to 40B units. Mike, do you have?
Yeah, I just had two, all those points were really good. I just wanted to add 2 points. First off, we actively and will continue to actively maintain a list of people that can be sold affordable units. So we have an ongoing list. We need to update it, but we do still have a list. Second point, I think, is with regard to making condominiums into some of these apartment houses. Anything that qualifies, so we count it as 100%, the town probably will fight and never allow to have it turned into condominiums, because we're able, even though only 25% of the units are affordable, we get to count 100% of the units as affordable on our SHI list. And that's, we've achieved 10%, and I think the town would never want to drop below 10% and be susceptible again to an unfriendly 40B. Not that we won't have 40Bs proposed here, we won't want to go forward with another unfriendly 40B. You follow that? It's a 40B rule that the units are all rental, 100% count, but it's condos only the ones that are affordable count. So that's why it's more desirable to have rental.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yes.
Amanda Drainville, 57 Wentworth Street. My question is this chart. What is the current rule? So like 1 to 7 units, is it based on a percentage, and this is proposing actual hard numbers?
Right, yes, that's exactly right. Right now, the bylaw just says if you are proposing 10 or more, you have to provide 15% affordable. And then we recently discovered some proposals won't come out equal, and then we were kind of deciding whether we round down or round up, so we decided to really eliminate that confusion and just straight out tell them, and then we started at a lower number because we weren't, in all cases, it's not exactly 15%, so there is a little bit of rounding that we're doing.
Okay, that's good, because I've been to some of the Islington meetings on the apartment, and I know it's a 12-unit proposal right now, so that clarifies. Because it would fall under the 10 to 15 units, so.
Yeah, there are people from the housing authority that wanted, they said, if it's a fractional unit, you have to round it up, because if you don't, then you won't have 15%, and you can't build a fractional unit. But what this is a good compromise. We've taken we looked at those smaller numbers more closely, and everything above a certain point, which is a large project, we just rounded up. So I think this is fair, and it's a good compromise to just everything rounding up.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Steve Schwartz again. Just a question, if Article 1 passes and this article is voted on separately and does not, do you default back to the table that you had currently?
No, this amendment would apply to, we have it written so that it would go into the SRD, that senior residential. So if Article 1 does not pass, the existing SRD will stay the same, except for this chart will be included in that.
Just for the record on senior residential development, if you're required to have 10 to 15 units, you need 2 units of affordable housing. These are units that the developer will sell as affordable units. These are not units that will be given to the Affordable Housing Committee for them to do as they see fit with those units. Is that correct? The developer will sell these units as affordable units to an applicant, to a purchaser who is over the age of 55, which will be determined by his license or her license when they purchase the unit. Is that correct?
They'd have to be on the list of affordable.
Well, yeah, but they would also have to be over the age of 55.
They have to be both, yes.
Yes, okay.
Anything else on this one? I see no affirmative responses, so I think we can move on to the next one.
All right, the next article, this amendment proposes an administrative review process for minor alterations to existing wireless facilities. For ones that have already been permitted, they're either already in place, and then when they come in to the building department, often they'll come in with building permits for some changes. If it's determined to be minor in nature by the building commissioner with no significant visible or exterior changes, then it would be forwarded to the town planner for an administrative review. So that would not be a planning board review, but it would be the same requirements under our environmental impact design review, where they would still have to submit the application, and then a decision with conditions would be written, and that's within a 21-day process. So that would be needed before they could get their building permits. And just for an example, this is 690 Canton Street in this picture. So that was already approved by the planning board after several years ago. But applications like this will come in to change out their antennas on a regular basis. So something like that where there's no change visible would be done through an administrative review.
Questions, Marjorie?
On the red line, it also speaks to wireless facilities where there's visible exterior changes. So it says that, or which will result in visible exterior changes to an existing wireless facility which are determined by the building commissioner to be sufficiently minor in nature, may be permitted. So if there's exterior changes, is there any guidance for the building commissioner determining if it's Minor?
Thought our language had said, no significant visible changes, so it may be visible, we were thinking a new visible of the, antenna, but be of the similar or the same size. I think that's how we had it written.
Laura, thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
There are regulations that the FCC has, and there's the Middle Class Tax Relief Act that specifies what's an amendment that is to be considered minor and what's an amendment that's to be considered major.
Okay, so there is guidance.
There is guidance. The guidance that, that's given to us would allow the planning board would be encouraged to consider a minor change if a structure grew by no more than 20%. Our planning board considers a change that's, how to describe this. We have mostly stealth facilities in town. So we have, say, a flagpole design. If you look at the one at Morrison Park, if you were to increase the width of that flagpole by 20%, it would be a significant change. So rather than define it in the bylaw what's significant and what's not, we allow the building commissioner to take a look at it and determine based on a particular structure what would be significant and what would be a minor change. There is guidance that says a minor change is something that's less than 20% greater in width or height than what it currently is. Where it's a stealth facility, though, that does not apply. You have to take a look at the proposal exactly as it is and what effect it would have. We have the same language throughout our bylaw that the building commissioner in many cases gets to determine if a change is de minimis or not. So we just go by the standard definition of de minimis.
So on the poles, if there's a visible exterior change and the building commissioner determines it's de minimis, who does it go to next?
Then it goes to the town planner,
And if
the town planner looks at it, and
can
if
she
the
say
town
no?
planner, yes, she can.
Okay.
She can say no, she can say yes with conditions.
Okay.
And if the applicant does not like the decision that he gets from the town planner, he can apply to the planning board for a full review.
Okay, great, thank you.
And at no point are butters notified of any
For an
changes?
administrative change, they are not. For a change that has to go before the planning board, the butters are notified. So that's taken into consideration by the building commissioner when he looks at it. If it's something that would have any effect on a butter, he will not send it for administrative review. He will send it to the planning board.
Anything else on this one?
The next article is amendments to our parking section 6 in the bylaw. We currently have minimum parking requirements that are based on the use. This proposal, we're not adding a lot of new language. We already allow for some shared and joint parking. However, this amendment is changing the process, the review process with the planning board from a special permit to a waiver. It would still be a public hearing, but we're just giving that option. Special permits also have a appeal period, 20-day appeal period, so it's a much longer process. So the waiver would be for the planning board to review to allow shared parking for locations between 400 and 600 feet of each other, so they could share the parking spaces. And then there's also added language that the required minimum number of spaces could be reduced after the board would review the intensity of the uses, look at things like hours, and so that they would kind of essentially double count those parking spaces by looking at the uses to see if they're compatible. This language also tightened their findings that they would have to make, that they would require permanent easements or an overflow area if that use ever became more intense and they needed to expand their parking. Also added that there had to be a safe pedestrian connection between the lots that were sharing parking spaces.
Questions from FinCom? Questions or?
The buildings that are sharing are not necessarily owned by the same person, so there could be a sale of one building.
That could be, yes.
Okay,
So that's why we would want a permanent protection such as an easement.
Is there an example of that type of parking situation that we could reference to?
I can give you two examples. One example is at Kiara. The planning board approved a special permit to allow Kiara to put outdoor seating, which took up some parking spaces and added seating at the same time. They were able to do that by being flexible, allowing a special permit, by allowing Kiara to put in place provisions to increase their parking if they ever discovered there was a problem. We looked at Kiara and said there's plenty of parking there at night that on adjacent properties that is not used when Kiara's open, just as Kiara's parking is not used when those daytime businesses are open. So it was a great opportunity to share, and there are permanent easements that are in place and a mechanism for developing additional parking if necessary. Another example is the Stagecoach Plaza, which recently received a special permit from the planning board as well. That's where Camellas is. When Camellas wanted to go in, there were other uses in the building, and if you added up the parking count for all the different uses, you exceeded the number of spaces that were on that property. So the planning board worked with the developer. In that case, they owned an adjacent property, and this picture here is showing a new walkway that goes from the Stagecoach Plaza to 54 Hartford Street. In that case, they happened to be two properties, both owned by the Salvatore Capital, and so it was very easy to make the shared parking. And what they do is they have employees park in the adjacent lot and frees up more spaces in the lot where Camellas is. There's also a case where it worked because there were time differences in the businesses. So we now have Arch Orthodontics that's in that building. It's very much a daytime and Saturday morning business. And then we have Camellas, which is an evening and weekend night business. So in many cases, you have an opportunity to have shared parking. Without this article, that always requires a special permit from the planning board. This article is intended to allow it by waiver as opposed to a special permit. And that just has to do with the way an application comes to the planning board. Often, we'll get an application that comes to the board on the site plan review. It'll be advertised for that. The abutter notices will go out, and the board will be considering the site plan. And then it becomes obvious that really what they need is a special permit as well. With the waiver provision, the planning board is able to just go ahead with that same application, discuss it at the public hearing, and grant a waiver. With the existing article that does not have a waiver provision, what they would have to do is they would have to stop, go back out, re-advertise, and delay the business for a minimum of a month to have that new advertisement placed, so that it's advertised for a special hearing as well as a site plan. That often happens because the developer is renovating their property but doesn't know who the user is. During the process, they find out who the user is. So you might have a multi-tenanted structure that you're looking to develop, but you don't have the businesses identified. Once you identify the businesses, if one of them is different than you had anticipated, for instance, you were thinking you'd have two retail businesses and you end up with a retail and a restaurant, the parking count changes, and then you need to address it in a certain way. So this allows the planning board to consider it with the same conditions, looking at whether the parking works because it's different hours, whether there's sufficient protections in place to preserve parking in the future if the uses change. But it does it through a waiver provision instead of a special permit, so it doesn't put the brakes on the project and make us wait to go back out to re-advertise. So it's really allowing expedited permitting, I guess is the way I would put it. It allows for the same thorough review, but to do it in a more timely fashion.
Thanks, Dawn. Anything else on this one? No? I don't think so. We're ready to move on. Abby?
The next article is our housekeeping article. So we did housekeeping amendments are changes that aren't substantially changing the bylaw, but just are meant to correct some errors or inconsistencies that we find either on the map or in the bylaw. We're making some, last year, at last town meeting, the planning board became the special permit authority for earth material movement, but that was not reflected in the table of uses. So we would, this amendment just proposes that, fixing that in the table of uses, as well as in one place we had written medicinal marijuana dispensaries where it really should be registered marijuana dispensary. That's how we call it in our bylaw by definition and in the section. Then correcting some section numbering, and then just some grammar errors. And then at one point we were talking about Board of Health where we had referenced the planning board. And then one map change. If you look on the map, the University Ave Mixed Use Overlay District, the way it was adopted by a town meeting on the master plan. It's those blue diagonal lines should extend all the way back to Whitewood Road. As you can see in the picture on the left, it just cuts off that small sliver. So this amendment would just pull that back to the edge of the property line.
We can move on.
And then the last article is to amend the minimum project area size in the flexible multiple use overlay district 1, which is the University Ave FMU district. Reduce that from 30 acres down to 10 acres. The FMUOD, as you can see in that photo, it's the kind of red squares or purple squares, it may look purple squares. So we created this before we created the University Ave overlay district, where we had more development opportunities, and we had set it at 30. Now much of the area has been developed under the UMAUOD. So this is meant to encourage more redevelopment for opportunities for mixed use, since we don't have many of these 30-acre parcels left. And the second part of this article, at the definition of minimum project area, to include contiguous lots that are adjacent to each other or that extend across the street or over a right-of-way or a roadway. Because we realized that that definition was not clearly defined in our bylaw, and that definition would be for all 7 of our flexible multiple use overlay districts.
Questions from FinCom? Questions or comments from residents? I don't see any. Does that conclude?
Yes, and that is all of our articles, yes.
Super. Thank you very much, Abby. Thank you to planning board members. This now concludes our, I'm sorry?
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
Pam, can you maybe just answer a question regarding our earlier conversation? In long-range planning, I've heard the name, the budget committee, or, right?
Budget steering, I think it's called.
Budget steering. What role do they play in setting the budgets for the town and having a conversation with the school committee? I don't understand what role they play.
Well, we've had that
That might help us.
for a number of years, and it's for FinCom, selectmen, and school committee to talk through the budget issues, make sure everyone understands all of the financing, all of the budgets, what's being proposed.
And has that been working? Has there been conversations on this year's budget in that group with the school committee?
They've been
It's
attempted.
been something that's worked for a number of years. We have a lot of really, really good, thorough discussions. I think some of you who are members of that know that, frankly, this year the school committee said we're not coming, and didn't come to some of the meetings. So we continued to have them and went on. We had one last week where one school committee member came, and it was a terrific meeting.
Okay, good.
They've been going on for, I was here because of the inception of those 26 years ago, and it was to avoid disputes about the budget between municipal government and the school department, and it was a way of working out issues related to how the monies would be allocated and what priorities needed to be established, and it was meant to be prior to, during, and subsequent to the budget process. It wasn't meant to come, it was supposed to be an evolving thing, so it started early in the fall and went right through the town meeting. And that got interpreted differently this year, unfortunately.
Great, thanks for the clarification. I wasn't quite sure. Thank you.
Anything else from residents before we close the public hearing portion of this meeting? No? Okay. So we will now close the public hearing portion of the meeting. Our meeting is still ongoing, though. I want to thank again the planning board. Thank you all for being here this evening. Great to see everyone. I'm not going to a little too late. I just wanted to remind you that our next meeting is next week, next Tuesday the 15th, where we'll be having subcommittee reports from education, OPEB, municipal, and I think Long Range. So we look forward to that. You want to raise that other?
Yeah, actually, I have a question for the committee. Are people open to discussing tonight and possibly voting on the eminent domain article? I feel we had a pretty thorough discussion last night, a lot of the facts on the table. We could avoid having to go through that again in a subsequent meeting. So if everyone's kind of comfortable having a discussion, I'd love to hear what we have to say.
And just to be clear, we are allowed to vote after we've had a public hearing. We don't have to have another one on any number of articles. So, but, you know, I agree with Craig that it's a good question to raise, but only if people are comfortable voting. Is there anyone who's not comfortable?
Well, the only question I would raise, have we set an first, I'd love to get it done, but my question is, have we set an expectation? It was a fairly difficult meeting with both sides, and have we set an expectation that there's going to be a further forum? That's the only thing I'd be concerned about procedurally. I don't know how to answer that. Do they think there's going to be another forum for them to come forward? I don't know.
I don't remember a conversation about that, but I mean, personally, I would feel that the issues were aired thoroughly.
Agree, Mary, I totally agree on that, but I'm just.
Even if there were any expectation, I don't know what else they could bring before us that would add
Well,
to the issue.
no matter what we say, it's still a town meeting article, so they would still be bringing it before town meeting, right?
There's no more opportunity for public input, right?
Well, we have another public hearing.
Oh, we do.
We do.
But we had one public hearing where.
And we voted in the past on articles before we got through the entire public hearing process. I mean, we have done it in the past.
And if we don't require any further information.
That's the key. That's the key.
Right.
Right.
Right. Are people, is there anyone uncomfortable voting tonight? No? All right, well then, if it's moved.
Yeah, I'll make a motion for indefinite postponement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Appears to be a unanimous vote in favor of indefinite postponement. Peter,
Can I just make a statement?
please.
I just want everybody to know, so on that property, that property was sold from Mrs. Barlow. Next to my house, I bought a piece of property from Mrs. Barlow. Similar, but different. I don't have a street behind me. I did check with the town's attorney. He said I have no conflict of interest, and I sort of have the same concerns that you guys would, so I'm free to vote. But I just want you to know I checked it, and I'm clear.
But there is a path on yours.
But you can't go on.
You just can't put a swimming pool.
Can I ask a question on Tuesday's meeting? Given the discussion tonight, is it too soon to present out on budget? Because I feel like last year we presented and things changed again after, and it kind of, I don't know, I think it gets circular in a certain way.
The problem is the timing.
I know, we're tight.
For your budget, we haven't really heard any details about.
Right, and I understand that, yeah.
Mine,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure.
But last year I think all the numbers changed, so, I don't know.
I mean, as a practical matter, we have our public hearings scheduled, I mean, this is the crunch month for us. March 28th and 29th is the next set of hearings, and then we need to vote as of the 29th. The votes will need to get done by when, Jane?
It's a really fast turnaround.
It's
after
usually
the
3
28th.
days after that
Yeah,
last
right.
meeting, as you know, to get the write-ups in. So,
I feel like we went back and on the municipal, I think Dave Blessing did a bunch of rework because math was changed. So I'm fine with doing it, but if it becomes a lot of rework and it's a lot of time for people to come to discuss budgets that are changing, they just said they're not going to discuss school committee till closer to the 23rd. So yeah, it's just a time issue, but it's in some ways a little bit of waste of time to spend a night to go through it for something that might change again, so.
I hear you. I think we're between a rock and a hard
Yeah.
place. If we maybe just to discuss it with whatever caveats there may be, and just, all we can do is the best we can with the
Right.
timeline we've
Right.
been given and the timing of the budget. I can't think of any other way to resolve that, and we certainly don't want to add another meeting
No.
this month with a month of 5 meetings already for folks. It's a lot of time, and late nights. So does that help?
That's fine, I just thought I'd put it out there because
Yeah.
it seems a little redundant in some ways, you know?
I agree. Anything else, folks?
Mary Ann, is there any feedback that we should give the selectmen, maybe given what the process here, maybe encouraging these folks to get together to resolve? I mean, it seems we got some momentum going here. I'd like to see it. Just wondering, do you talk to the chair?
Well, talked a little to Barb about that. I think maybe between Barb and I will work to do that.
Okay.
And Barb has
I mean,
been.
there've been times in the past when the FinCom chair has kind of gotten people to talk and come up with.
Well, that's what I'm sort of, I mean, I think we made,
Not to put on Mary Ann.
I'm hoping
No,
that, no,
happy to.
I'm hoping that, I mean, the simple call could be that it was a well-attended, fruitful, fairly direct discussion. And one of the couple who came up to me afterwards and said their intent on meeting with, I mean, I think we heard at the very end on resolving this. So I would just encourage maybe through the chair, the selectmen to, if they're prepared to meet and resolve it, let's get it resolved before we get to floor town meeting. That's the
Well,
goal, not have a floor
Before
fight.
we have to write,
Right.
do the
Right.
work.
Right. But they've got to, I'm hoping, Mary Ann, that the selectmen and the school committee will sit down and come to some, conclusion to this.
Agreed. I will reach out.
Okay.
Anything else, folks? Okay, well, if not, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Thanks, everybody.
Just remember,
Thank you, too.
I forgot.